League of Legends, The Lord of the Thousand Year War. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 351. Those who invite you into a trap will always fall into the trap. The most lawless people in Lungmen are you wolves who suck human blood and human skin. Fuck you. You use the law to suppress people at this time. Why don't you talk about Lungmen law when you kidnap people normally? He cursed several times in his heart and estimated the fighting power of both sides again. Black Scorpion's eyes stayed on the chainmail of the kingdom soldiers, sighed secretly, and completely gave up the idea of giving it a try. In Lungmen, even the old ladies have several knives in their hands, but armor is not something that everyone has. Only the most fierce characters in the gang can have their own armor. But Blake can still try to kill by force. If Sinclair, a leader who walked out of the Kingdom Army training camp, is included, if they fight hard, they will have to leave everyone's lives here. There is no possibility of victory for two fully armed Kingdom soldiers. Really? I think I remembered it wrong. Lord Black, please, let's go. Seeing the unreasonable gangsters running away with their tails between their legs, Sinclair looked at Black with admiration, and then looked down at his armor. He thought he had to take action directly, but he never thought that this armor used to guard stability and order could be used in this way. Sighing, Sinclair set his sights on the Vastaya again. As expected, he did not see any expression of relief on the face of the male Vastaya, but a bit of strange regret. Sure enough, he has some skills. Thinking back to what Black said to him before he came over, Sinclair became more and more convinced. I'm sorry for letting you see some dirty stuff at Lungmen. Fortunately, these bastards haven't done anything wrong. My name is Black, and his name is Sinclair. We are responsible for guarding Lungmen. What are your names? Secretly observing Black's posture, Sinclair was sure that the man in front of him was a righteous soldier of the kingdom, and he didn't look like he had any ulterior motives. He couldn't help but remind himself that people's hearts are hidden in their stomachs. Even if he cooperated with Black, he must remain vigilant to avoid being sold out and counting money for others. Lecht, her name is Zaya. She is my wife. Thank you for your help, otherwise it would be troublesome. Standing next to the man who didn't comment, Zaya frowned and looked at the good human who helped her. Although she instinctively felt that something was wrong, she couldn't tell what was wrong. I have to say, sir, your Valoran accent is really standard, which saves us a lot of trouble. It is our responsibility to guard the order of Lungmen, but we should apologize to you. Mr. Lechter, Miss Zaya, welcome to the Kingdom of Gran. If it is convenient, please go with us to the Kingdom Garrison to register for entry. The main thing is to make a simple mark of your and Miss Zaya's magic. After that, you can travel around the Kingdom of Gran with Miss Zaya. I believe you will like the Kingdom of Gran. Mr. Lechter, do you have time now? It is better to handle the entry registration as soon as possible. Turning his head to look at the somewhat puzzled Zaya, Lester smiled and nodded. Then I will trouble Lord Black. No trouble, no trouble. Please follow me. Lechter, are we going to go with them? I don't think they are good people. Hearing this, Black paused and quickly recovered. He turned around with a smile and was about to say something, but saw that the Vastaya man was comforting his wife, which saved him a lot of talking. Zaya, it's very hurtful to speak so bluntly. I don't think Commander Black is a bad guy except for his face. Really? Really? With a twitch of his mouth, Black turned back with a bit of hurt, his face full of bitterness. Alas, my appearance is often misunderstood. It's rare to see a visitor as considerate as Mr. Lecht. The four of them left the dark alley and walked towards the downtown area. Sinclair was also a little confused. From the beginning, Black's target could not be the Kingdom Army garrison. In his opinion, if he wanted to make a move, it would be best to find a remote place. But what was the point of going to a crowded place? Along the way, he asked about some specific situations in a roundabout way. Black had basically determined the identity of the fat sheep, a pure-blooded Vastaya who came out of the psychedelic forest of Ionia, and was eager to adventure in the Valoran continent. Males have some social experience, but not much. I guess these experiences are accumulated all the way from Ionia. The female is more like a simple little girl who was deceived by the male. Her mature body is completely inconsistent with her mind. She always speaks without restraint, completely relying on and trusting the male. She always feels that the male can protect her from any harm, which means that as long as the male can be controlled, the female will become a fish on the chopping board and be slaughtered at will. The two should have some ability to take risks outside. As for whether they have a background, this is not Ionia. Who cares what your background is? Unless there are military dignitaries in Naxos behind them, no one can save these two Vastaya people. Thinking of the beautiful and hot carcass of the female Vastaya people, Blake made up his mind that he had to eat meat before selling it and enjoy it for a few days. If Sinclair is obedient, it is not impossible to let Sinclair play with it. As long as he tastes the sweetness, he does not believe that Sinclair will not follow him wholeheartedly. An hour later, Blake brought the three people to a spectacular and towering large building west of the Dragon Gate. There was a vast manor inside the wall. Two tough men wearing leather armor and holding halberds stood outside the door, and more than a dozen guys who looked difficult to deal with came in and out. From the outside, the building did not look like a fortress where soldiers were stationed, but rather a mercenary guild. As if sensing the hesitation in the man's eyes, Black explained amiably, "Mr. Lester, because most outsiders choose to make a living as mercenaries, in order to facilitate the management of foreigners who come to make a living, the kingdom garrison of Langman is set up at the location of the mercenary guild. Please rest assured that you will not encounter any danger here." So that's how it is. The doubt in Lester's eyes disappeared, and Black smiled. "Please come in, we will be there soon." Looking at the three people walking in front, Sinclair frowned. The royal family is behind the mercenary guild of the kingdom of Gran. If it is said that the backers of Black are the royal nobles, then it can also explain why Black can be both black and white. After all this time, the biggest human traffickers are those noble lords. Sinclair laughed self-deprecatingly in an inaudible voice and followed in. When the four people entered one by one, the mercenary guards at the door began to whisper to each other. "That bastard Black has made a fortune again. Two top-notch people. Hey, did you notice that the male Vastaya looks a bit like someone? Now that you mention it, I really think he looks familiar. Who does he look like? Damn, I've been doing it too much with little Mary recently, and my brain can't remember things. What do you say he looks like? How should I know? I just think he looks a bit like the middle-aged mercenary in black, who was sitting next to the reception table and drinking alone, took his eyes off the passers-by, and touched his pocket, and took out a glittering gold coin. The heavy gold coin was made with very delicate and complex craftsmanship. The pattern of stars surrounded the outer ring of the gold coin. On the back was a huge city in the shape of emerald, named Fidlit, and on the front was a majestic and handsome human face. The owner of the human face was the master he followed all his life. Although until today, except for the masked lord of the arena who played the role of the master, he had never really seen the master. All members of the Night's Edge knew that the master who went to Ionia had not been heard from for a long time. "Handsome man, can you buy me a drink with this gold coin? I think we have a lot to discuss." An uninvited beautiful girl sat next to him. Her voice was soft and numb, and she was very charming. "Of course, money has to be spent to create value, but I'm sorry, now is not the time." "Then when is the time?" "At night." The gold coin spun on the man's fingertips and disappeared in the next second, which disappointed the girl. "When I find its owner." Before she understood what the man meant, the girl found that the man had disappeared in front of her eyes, and she couldn't help but stamp her feet in shame. What's so magical about the things I picked up? Miser. I didn't expect that the holy and powerful forbidden magic stone of Demacia would appear here and become an accomplice of evil. I originally thought that the forbidden magic stone was the most sacred and important thing in Demacia, but it still couldn't resist the corruption of human nature. From this point of view, you are more capable than the Emerald Territory. Damn it. You are not big, but you are so arrogant. Demacia and Emerald Territory are also something that a lowly beast slave like you can talk about. Do you really think you are something? Be careful, I will olive your little white face in a while. Leched. I want to eat it. Zaya began to bar her teeth viciously, but was pulled by the man. It's better not to do cannibalism unless it is absolutely necessary. I will let Zaya teach him a lesson later. Yara listened to Lech. Lester was too lazy to pay attention to the guy who was destined to die. He was also a little surprised that he was tricked into a house made entirely of forbidden magic stone. He had thought about some kind of binding magic circle or a righteous group fight, but the appearance of the forbidden magic stone in front of him really surprised him. In fact, the Emerald Territory had also negotiated with Demacia to buy some forbidden magic stone for a search, but it was rejected by Demacia on the grounds that forbidden magic stone is a national treasure of Demacia and is absolutely not allowed to be circulated outside. Later, they got some scraps in secret, but unfortunately, some scraps could not be studied to any great extent. After all, only the forbidden magic stone forest with runes buried in it can produce authentic forbidden magic wood powder. Something that neither the Emerald Territory nor Naxos could get appeared in the territory of the Kingdom of Gran at this moment. It seems that the hidden relationship is far more than just smuggling. Waving his hand to stop the thug's vulgar insults, Blake sneered at the two Vastea people who had become caged birds. The dozen or so elite mercenaries behind him wearing military armor and with paralysis poison on their swords, bows, and crossbows were the basis for his harsh words. After they were controlled, they were given the magic suppressing rings that they had obtained from the Black Rose organization in Naxos at great cost, and then the surgery to destroy their magic circuits was performed. Even if the two Vastea had great abilities, they would not be able to turn things around. They could only wear collars and become slaves of the nobles, being driven and played with by others. As long as they could not release any strange magic, the savage orcs would never be a match for humans. This was an unchanging truth that dozens of orcs who had become the playthings of the nobles had proven in their second half of their lives. Boy, you are really good at seeing that this is a room that isolates magic. You must have experienced something. Unfortunately, it is useless. You can't even think of releasing half of your magic here. I advise you to surrender obediently. Otherwise, if there is something missing in your body, your future master may not be kind to you. No one likes a broken waist except for those with unique hobbies. Is this all you have? If so, I'm very disappointed. Lester smiled faintly as he glanced at the familiar obsidian magic blocking ring in the enemy's hand. He had studied this thing in the Mage Academy. Through the special rune formation engraved on the obsidian, it can disrupt the flow of mana and absorb mana element. Through the absorbed mana element, the wearer's perception and mobilization of mana can be reversed to form a perfect closed loop. As long as the magic blocking ring is locked around the neck, most mages will become ordinary people who can be slaughtered at will. This most refers to the instructors of the Black Rose Mage Academy and below. Without special methods, they can't get rid of it. The magic forbidden rings were originally used by the Black Rose to deal with defectors and to arrest and judge them. They were made of precious earth crystal obsidian enchantments. The number of Black Rose wizards who could make such things could only be counted on one hand. The Black Rose attached great importance to them. Except for the conditional exchange of strategic materials, they could not be circulated outside. As an ally and strategic partner of the Black Rose, the Emerald Territory only got 5 sets of obsidian magic forbidden rings. From this point of view, the Grand Kingdom must have paid a considerable price to get 2 magic forbidden rings. Disappointed? No, 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 you won't be disappointed. You will only understand what pain is. What is worse than death? Catch them. Be careful not to hurt the female orc. Blake patted Sinclair's shoulder proudly with 5 or 6 mercenaries guarding the locked magic forbidden stone door. Little brother, have I learned anything from you? Chapter 352 Assassination with no survivors. B. Brother Black, you. What's wrong? Are you so scared that you can't even talk? I didn't know you were so useless. The door behind us is frozen. Black turned his head with a frown and a little disappointed with Sinclair. At some point, a thin layer of ice had completely covered the stone door. The man's face changed, and he pulled the door handle hard, but the stone door didn't move at all. He used the iron spear in his hand to chisel the ice layer, but the ice layer was intact. This is a wizard GD built with Demacia's forbidden magic stone, but at this moment, magic appeared silently. He turned his head with a stiff face, and what came into his eyes was the smile of the Vastea people. Black's heart sank. but his face was instantly accompanied by a humble smile. He fell to his knees, and his smooth operation directly shocked Sinclair and others. This face is thicker than the frozen stone door. Stop it. Brother leached, I made a mistake. I admit my mistake. Fortunately, I didn't make a big mistake. This is also a blessing in disguise. Although I don't have much money on me, it's enough for you and your girlfriend to have a good meal. Let's open the door, and all these things will be yours. The Mercenary Guild of Langman is definitely not your opponent, and it's very troublesome to deal with them. Brother, I apologize to you, and send you out of Langman. Let's just treat it as an acquaintance without any conflicts. Do you think it's okay? The man kneeling on the ground took out all the precious jewelry and coins on his body and put them on the ground while talking, and did not forget to remind others to do the same. In his opinion, 100 garnet rings are not as important as his own life. If you lose money, you can earn it again, but if you lose your life, you will lose everything. The 3 wives will take their children to find a new father and let the stepfather beat his wife and children's buttocks. Lord Black, why are you all just staring at me? Why don't you apologize to the Lecter brothers? Do you all want to die here? Do you really think that the junks in your hands can deal with the magic that even the magic forbidden stone can't seal? Don't hesitate. I'll make up for how much money you need. Don't really act like an idiot who values money over life. The sound of dingling clang came one after another, and even the heavy obsidian magic forbidden ring was thrown on the ground casually, leaving a shallow mark. Finally realizing the seriousness of the matter, although he felt distressed, Sinclair did not dare to disobey. He slowly rummaged around and finally found more than 40 silver coins, which were not as good as one of Black's rings. It was also at this time that Sinclair really learned something from Black, and understood why he could only take out more than 40 silver coins, while Black could have 3 gem rings and a gem necklace. Seeing that the others had also thrown away their weapons and started to take out valuable things, Black said to Lester, who seemed to be smiling, "Boss Lecht, do you think this is okay? These things add up to 5 or 6 gold coins. Please forgive us for our mistakes." Seeing everything in front of him, Lester sighed. To be honest, Lester admired the man kneeling in front of him. Although he was a bad man, he was very capable. If he was loyal and would not betray, such a character would be the favorite subordinate of the superior, and he would not feel bad, even if he needed to abandon him. He was ruthless and left no room for the enemy. He went all out, but he could make wise judgments quickly when the situation was unclear. He was flexible and did not want any dignity to save his life. He also knew how to win people's hearts at this time. These precious qualities were enough to make a man gradually rise to a high position over the years and become a powerful person who was a disaster to one side. If such a person was controlled by some means, he would surely become a more important chess piece of the Grand Kingdom. What a pity. What a pity. Isn't that enough? I still have money, and I'll have more money when I get out. Brother Lecter, don't do anything yet. Blake's heart skipped a beat, and he had a bad feeling, but he saw Lecter saying to Zaya, what do you want to do? Not only did they deceive us, they also wanted to hurt us. I felt bad from the beginning, and it turned out to be true. Lecter, I hate them. The tall woman's face was rarely filled with anger. Lecter nodded, looked at Blake who was waiting for the verdict, and sighed. It's a pity that I'm not the only one who came here. Blake, I actually like you very much, but the problem is that Zaya doesn't like you, and I just need to teach the immature Zaya how to deal with humans. As for money, I don't lack it, so although you are valuable, it's not enough. Although there are not many people like you, they are not rare, and you can still find someone if you want. What you mean is, there is really nothing to talk about. I can't even be a dog. Silence is the best answer. Blake raised his head, the sadness on his face was beyond words. The next second, with red eyes, Blake clenched the spear on the ground and threw it directly at Zaya. Kill them. As long as you can kill them, the treasure on the ground will be divided equally among you. Under Blake's encouragement, everyone finally reacted, picked up their weapons again and roared. Grabbing the flying spear, Lester threw it aside and hugged the woman who was a head taller than him. The man stood on tiptoes and whispered softly beside the woman's petite ear. Go, Zaya. There is no need to hold back. Do what you want to do. Leave the rest to me. My only request is that you don't change into dragon form, but use human form to solve it. Let me see your ability." When the man let go of her, Xayah came back to her senses from the dizziness, and her fair earlobes had turned light pink. In addition to the usual sense of security, this time there was also a strange sense of satisfaction that she had never felt before. Xayah covered her pounding heart and nodded shyly to the man, then turned around and let her upturned lips and slender eyebrows calm down. It was only a slight change in her eyebrows and lips, but her whole beautiful face was instantly filled with a breathtaking murderous aura, and her round pupils changed into vertical pupils, which made people feel cold. Xayah proved to Lester with facts that, even if it was transformed into a human, the dragon still had the power and majesty of a dragon. From the beginning, he knew how strong Xayah's physical strength was, but Xayah's instinctive fighting power still surprised him a little. The sword slashing on the scaly arms and waist and abdomen would only make a sound of metal and stone colliding, and could not cause any effective damage to the dragon girl at all. The girl's powerful strength was enough to break the weapon, making the attacker's body break easily like a willow branch, and even the armor would have a deep dent under the ordinary jab, which made the soldiers in the armor tremble with fear. In Lester's opinion, this was a massacre. Broken limbs were everywhere, and broken fingers were thrown on the ground casually like a broken building block toyed by a child. The blood was flowing more and more, and fewer people were breathing. Bang flew backwards and hit the wall. His bones seemed to be broken, and he had no strength in his body. Sinclair leaned against the wall weakly, staring at his torn right arm with empty eyes. His beloved spear was still in his right hand, but it was no longer under his control. In a trance, Sinclair seemed to be able to feel that his right hand was still grasping and clenching, just like attacking the wooden target in the Kingdom Army training ground. It was a pity that the feeling was an illusion after all. It was not until the massacre began that he completely understood how much wisdom and courage Blake, who had no shame and kowtowed to the enemy at the beginning, had to kneel down and beg for mercy in front of the cold-blooded Vastaya man who was watching coldly. Unlike himself, who was full of luck, Blake understood the gap between the two sides the moment the magic appeared in the forbidden magic chamber. If he had really asked for forgiveness, the 14 people in front of him would not have died. Compared with the cost of life, the jewels and jewelry on the ground stained with blood, which he had once hoped for, seemed a little insignificant. He didn't know how he was bewitched to listen to Blake's nonsense and come here to give up his life when there were still various expectations that had not been realized. Sinclair smiled bitterly and moved his eyes to the right with difficulty. Blake's head was directly pulled off his neck by the monster. When his headless body fell to the ground, his head rolled in a pool of blood, and he died with his eyes open. As the last mercenary with intact limbs became a mutilated corpse, the blood-soaked monster finally turned its head to look at him. The beautiful cheeks were covered with blood and mincemeat, which completely lost the beauty that could not be ignored by the female monster, and also allowed Sinclair to clearly see the true appearance of the female monster hidden under the beauty. Sinclair saw the beautiful woman's eyes clearly. Those were the same crimson narrow pupils as those of the top predators. In the words of his grandmother, such eyes can allow predators to find their prey at a glance in a chaotic environment, kill them with one blow, and swallow them into their stomachs. Including the invulnerable scales and strange strength on the woman's body. Everything is for the purpose of hunting prey. What's funny is that the invincible female monster who casually slaughtered himself and others showed absolute obedience to another Vastaya, so it goes without saying how terrible the other man who used strange magic to seal the stone door from beginning to end is. In the eyes of that man, Blake, who he believed in and had many means, was just a small character from beginning to end. In Blake's words, he didn't even have the opportunity to beg for mercy like a dog. And he was not as good as Blake, and he didn't even have a chance to say a word to such a person until his death. With the last bit of strength, Sinclair looked at the female monster getting closer and closer, and slowly opened his mouth. Bang! The head exploded. Without saying anything to anyone else, Xayah retracted her bloody right leg, and looked around indifferently at the enemy, who had become a pile of meat paste. The moment she turned her head, the woman's face returned to her usual innocent look, and the scales on her limbs quickly disappeared. Leched, can I kill them? Will it be troublesome? The pouting woman stretched out her right hand, as if she just realized that she was dirty, and carefully retracted her hand, but was gently pulled by the man halfway. The man put his other hand on Zaya's face and helped Zaya remove the meat stuck on her cheek. Lester's eyes were particularly gentle, as if he was enjoying afternoon tea with his girlfriend. Of course, this is a perfect assassination. I'm very satisfied. The only problem is that you don't pay much attention to your image. Hearing Lester say this, Zaya's eyebrows curved, and the scary vertical pupils turned into round and cute shapes. Master, you are an out and out demon. This is such a deep pain and despair. I really love you. Evelyn, who turned into a cat, jumped up from the ground and jumped onto the man's shoulder in a few seconds, looking intoxicated by the negative emotions remaining in the air. Does the forbidden magic stone have no effect on you? Hearing Lester's question, Evelyn looked at the wall made of forbidden magic stone with disdain and licked her cat's paw elegantly. It's just a few broken stones with special powers, Master. The power that supports the demon's actions is not magic, but then again, Master, are you going to kill it? Turning the entire Longman into a place of despair like this, just thinking about it. No, Evelyn wants it, Master. Grabbing the back of Fate's neck, Lester threw the shameful demon in heat back into the shadow on the ground. After solving the cat Evelyn, who was thinking about farts, Lester said to Zaya, killing is easy, but how to keep yourself clean after killing is the most difficult. Zaya, tell me, if you are alone, what will you do next? After thinking seriously, Zaya clenched her fist and shook it. Whoever stops me, I will beat him flat. Looking down at the many bodies that had been flattened, the man sighed and felt that he had to work harder to educate Zaya. That will only make you the enemy of all mankind. Zaya, if you really encounter such a thing alone, you should think more. There are always better ways to solve the difficulties. Taking action is only the simplest and most brainless way, and it is not applicable in many situations. Then what will Lester do? It's very simple. Pointing to the bodies on the ground, Lester smiled. Just let us become a part of it, and then find a guy who doesn't exist, and won't be discovered to take the blame. Half an hour later, a terrible black magic disaster broke out in the Mercenary Guild. A cruel black wizard sneaked into the Mercenary Guild and massacred many innocent mercenaries and adventurers by summoning flesh and blood zombies. The terrible zombies knew how to hold the weapons they used in their lifetime and use them to attack others. For a time, the Mercenary Guild was in chaos and many people died in the disaster. The Kingdom Army stationed in Longman quickly sent thousands of people to surround the Mercenary Guild. With the joint efforts of the Kingdom Army and the mercenaries, the disaster of black magic was curbed. Unfortunately, the despicable and cruel black wizard has disappeared. Chapter 353, Narcissus' Dilemma. When the most famous seaport city of the Grun Kingdom, Longman, was in a state of panic due to an unknown black wizard, Rose stood up a little irritably, left the noisy fortress conference hall, walked a few steps to the balcony, and squinted her eyes in the sun. The air outside was very good. The breeze blowing in her face made the female mage, who had long been fed up with the stink of men, relax a little. Looking around, the snow-covered Goral Mountains on the west side were pure and graceful, and the three peaks of Pagras in the east blocked the steam from the Sea of Watchers on the right side of the mountains, making the red land on the west foot of the mountains look a little dry. Fortunately, the Black Iron River that stretches for thousands of miles is enough to nourish and irrigate the slightly dry land, allowing the Narxans, who are as hard as a piece of iron, to take deep root in the ground and reproduce. Only 100 years later, a series of villages emerged again on the hills that were slaughtered into white land. Human life is as tough as a piece of mud that can never be broken, but also as fragile as an expensive magic black crystal, which will shatter into pieces with an unintentional collision. In a trance, a rough and domineering face with a wanton smile of contempt for life appeared in front of her eyes, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into an immortal black magic plate armor. A rolling head came from all directions amid the wailing of thousands of people, as if wanting to devour new souls. The desperate sense of oppression made the female mage tremble. It took a full 3 seconds for the female mage who supported the Blackstone battlement to get rid of the terrible illusion that she would never forget. M.O. Usual, you will never come back, forever, forever. Rose finally regained her composure after whispering what she had said countless times before, but she realized that she still didn't dare to say the taboo name after all. As one of the most representative buildings of the Immortal Bastion, the view from the top of the fortress is extremely wide. From a military point of view, there is probably no other land in the entire Naxos Hills that can build a military fortress of the same specifications. Looking down from the fortress, the densely packed humans are like ants under the starry sky, with only a few small black dots, busy and running around aimlessly, doing useless things for useless things, until the day when the end of life finally comes. I'm afraid I don't understand why I live in this life, why I live like this, or I realize it, but I don't know how to change it. A businessman spent 6 months traveling between Demacia and Naxos to trade, and what he really got was just a few bones thrown on the ground by the powerful. The things that really make money on the carriage will never reach the hands of ordinary people. The precious things that are out of the public's view have already been secretly marked with prices, and the exchange of interests has been completed in the hands of a few people. The fool didn't even know what happened from beginning to end. There are always people who think they are free, but most people don't understand that from the moment they leave their mother's womb, their fate has been decided by others. It is difficult to turn over. Wisdom, courage, determination, and luck are all indispensable. The greatness of power and politics lies in that all it takes is a few people behind the door to slap the table, and in Naxos, whether it is a young man carrying a heavy sack to support his family or a child waving a small wooden sword to play a battle game, they will put down all their work, pick up real swords, and go to the battlefield, and then die unclearly for the benefit of a few people under the slogan of justice. Hurry up and enjoy the last piece. It is better to die to protect your family than to die in the slavery of the enemy. With a small sigh, the female mage moved her eyes away from the tiny figure like an ant. She didn't plan to look at it for long. Mortals and mages are from two different worlds. Black mages are even worse than mages. She, whose life is close to eternal, and the terrible black mage are from two different worlds. There are not enough people who can talk about common topics with her. Having long been accustomed to life and death, the withering of mortal life and the unfortunate fate can no longer attract her attention. This is not indifference, but habit. Although it is still cold in early spring, the subtropical monsoon climate near the ocean makes the Immortal Fortress only have a few more wisps of refreshing breeze. At this moment, the breeze is a little cold. The female mage shrank her body, but a touching smile appeared on her face. It seems that there was a man who once hugged her waist on a snowy mountain and said shamelessly that he wanted to gain eternal life and travel thousands of mountains and rivers with her. With that seemingly foolish man hugging her, she didn't feel cold even on the snowy mountain. Unfortunately, 5 years have passed, and the man is still missing. Even the Black Rose Mage who is on a mission outside can't find any trace of him. The smile gradually faded. The female mage didn't know what she was thinking. She just patted her face, regained her calmness, and walked into the noisy conference hall again. She only had a little free time. We must not let General Margaret be dragged here by those Edis. We have to deal with those Edis on horseback. General Margaret must go to Fort Shelley as soon as possible. But if we don't annihilate those damn mages on horseback, are we going to watch the people of Naxos being slaughtered? How can the newly recruited Warband be a match for those cowards who can only cast magic while running away? At this moment, only the Emerald Territory led by Lady Margaret can deal with that group of mage knights who come and go like the wind. Every village is the foundation for the continuation of Naxos, and we must not sit idly by and watch the enemy wreak havoc. What you said sounds good. It's true that the Emerald Territory is powerful, but if we leave everything to the Emerald Territory, we might as well give the Immortal Fortress to Lord Lester. Anyway, they are a bunch of trash who have long forgotten the honor of their ancestors. Why occupy the Immortal Fortress? Peeing, farting, and having diarrhea all day long, creating terrible human garbage for the enemy to choke to death. Everyone. Naxans have never been afraid of death. If the Hedis massacre us, we will kill them back. We will massacre all the people in the North Sea Fortress and the Hedi City. Let's see who is more terrifying. Our fathers overthrew the tyrants of the Dark Ages, but we have to surrender to the northern barbarians who know a few spells because of death. Don't look at me, I'm talking about you, coward. I really don't want to be associated with you, you turtle son. No wonder your mother rejected my proposal last night. It turns out that she was afraid that you, an idiot, would recognize me as your father. Am I afraid of the Hedis? Do you have congenital brain retardation? Functional language disorder? I mean, are we afraid of the Hedis? You want a group of new recruits who have just picked up spears and shields to deal with a group of mages who come and go like the wind? You are pushing the people of Narxus into the fire pit. Want to fight, bastard? Question mark? Come on. Question mark? Damn you. Do you think I'm afraid of you? As they were talking, the two men took off their shirts and went to an open area to fight. Others did not try to stop them, but instead looked as if they were used to it. Rose frowned and looked at Nadaz, who was sitting in the first seat, and Stender, who was sitting in the second seat, but found that they were also frowning, and obviously could not come up with any good solution. Facing the Hedi people who mastered the unknown energy magic, the Narxan warband soldiers could only charge at the cost of their lives and forcibly kill the enemy in close combat under the magic attack. It was indeed a problem for the new recruits to deal with such an enemy. The elite legion of the Emerald Territory could deal with the Hedi mages who were destroying and looting everywhere in the hinterland, but this would destroy the combat agreement originally formulated with the Emerald Territory, and secondly, it would affect the support operations of Shelly Fortress. Because the Hedi people have been in a state of isolation and have been blocking the news of the North Sea, Black Rose just learned a few days ago that the Hedi people had excavated an ancient ruins. In the ruins, the Hedi people obtained a form of magic that they had never seen before. The specific situation and principle are not yet clear, but they also know that the source of energy magic is the sum of the power of the four elements. The destructiveness of energy magic may not be weaker than the damage of single element magic. The most terrifying thing is that the conditions for using energy magic are very low. Even people who don't have much magic talent can use it. The magicians of Black Rose are very powerful, but the number is simply not comparable to the hundreds of Hedi magicians. The magic energy arrow is not very powerful in the magic field, far less than a fireball condensed by the fire element, but the power of 100 magic energy arrows is far greater than that of a fireball, and the number has caused a terrible qualitative change. The Hedis can release 1,000 magic arrows at the same time, but the Black Rose cannot release 100 fireballs at the same time. Even among the 30,000 people led by Vakal, there are only more than 50 Black Rose mages. It is very difficult to use magic to defend. It is not realistic to kill the Hedis with magic. At present, Narxus is really not good at dealing with the energy attacks of the Hedis. A beautiful uppercut hit Ulysses' chin and knocked him out. Ursus wiped the blood from his nose and sat back in his seat as a winner. Nadaz waved his hand, and the guards in the conference hall carried the unconscious Ulysses out. Poor Ulysses will be sent home. During the period of recuperation, he may not be able to attend the military meeting. The others looked at each other in bewilderment. It seems that in the dispute between Ulysses and Ursus has more reason. Let General Margaret go to Fort Shelley, and General Alice stationed in Northernburg and our newly formed regiment will encircle and suppress the Hedis who are heading south. This is the only solution I can think of. We cannot retreat, just because the Hedis are so scary. Even if there is only one person left in Narxus, this last person must not surrender to the enemy. We cannot bring shame to our fathers, otherwise, we will not be able to see our parents after we die. I, Ursus Cerebum, cannot afford to lose face for this person. Without the hot temper he had when he quarreled with Ulysses at the beginning, Ursus said his opinion seriously and calmly, and then stopped talking. His calm and determined words seemed to have touched the others present, and some began to echo Ursus' words. Lord Ursus has some truth in what he said. We can't rely on the Emerald Territory for everything. We can't forget how our fathers defeated the former master of the Immortal Fortress, and created a stable and fertile land for us. The Hedis are terrible, but they are by no means invincible. The Hedis grabbed our Narxan people from the village and drove them like cattle and sheep to attack our fortress. We can't let go of this blood feud. We must repay them personally for this hatred. Rubbing his temple, Nadaz slapped the table, and his low voice made the others shut up. Stender, if we recruit soldiers now, how many people can we recruit in a month? If we count the 14-year-old boys and private slaves, recruiting 20,000 people a month should be the limit. We need more time for more people, and the preparation of logistical materials is also a problem. That's it. Start preparing as soon as possible. Ms. Rose, I wonder if the Black Rose has found a way to crack the Hades spell. Seeing that everyone's eyes fell on her, Rose shook her head. We need to capture a Hades mage to find out what kind of magic it is. Although he was a little disappointed, Nadas knew that this was normal. Just like Narxus did not expect the Hades hiding on the northeast coast of Aloran to suddenly turn against them, it is understandable that the Black Rose did not notice the magic obtained by the Hades in advance under the deliberate intelligence blockade of the Hades. Ms. Rose, in the battle against the Hades, we need more support from the Black Rose. Of course it's not a problem. The Black Rose is also very interested in the magic obtained by the Hades. As for if we can get information about the new magic ruins, we will share it with the Black Rose as soon as possible. Lord Nadas, thank you very much. As the sky gradually darkened, the somewhat tired Rose left the fortress and got on her carriage to drive towards Blackthorn Rose Street. The carriage moved forward, the iron-studded wooden wheels rolling on the Blackstone Road, drawing a clear dividing line. The street in front of the carriage remained peaceful and stable, as if it had not been affected by the war, but behind the carriage, teams of soldiers guarding the city and messengers on horseback had already begun to move, and more pedestrians and shops were affected. Military orders are like mountains, and once an order is issued, there is no room for maneuver. Most people saw the actions of the soldiers instead of fear and worry, but were excited. Every time a war was mobilized, Narxans who could not join the army due to various problems would get a precious opportunity to join the army, and on the battlefield it meant that they could gain military merit and honor by killing the enemy. Unfortunately, people did not understand what kind of terrible enemy they would face in a month. Rose knew that at least half of the people would die without even seeing what the enemy looked like. For thousands of years, war has never been simple. Rose lowered the curtain of the carriage and closed her eyes. A reader asked me why I didn't participate in the explosive update event yesterday. Let me explain here that the prerequisite for participating in the event is to be an author with an average subscription of 1000. I'm just a small loser and have no qualifications at all. Chapter 354 Emerald Territories New Forces. The carriage stopped at the entrance of Blackthorn Rose Street. Rose, who got off the carriage, was stunned. A familiar yet unfamiliar figure stood at the entrance of the mansion, staring at her home. A smile appeared unconsciously on the corner of her mouth, but the female wizard in charge of driving was surprised. She hadn't seen such an expression on her mistress's face for a long time. In fact, she wished that her mistress would have this expression every day, which would make her feel much less stressed. Lady Rose? Is there anything else you need to tell me? No problem, go ahead. By the way, tell others not to bother me, no matter what happens today. Yes. The closer she got to the other person, the faster Rose's heartbeat became, and her originally heavy footsteps became much lighter. After 5 years of not seeing each other, she found that she didn't feel alienated, but instead found the sense of ease she had just gotten along with. In fact, she hated this irrational state, but at this moment she was willing to make herself more emotional. Slowing down her pace and standing on tiptoe, the female mage had no usual solemnity and majesty. She crept like a squirrel preparing to steal pine cones. She reached the closest distance, stretched out her right hand before the man noticed, and patted the man's right shoulder with the joy of victory. Hey, why are you standing here like a fool? The playful female mage asked a silly question. The man turned around and was stunned when he saw the female mage. Then he took a step back with apology and responded politely. Ah, hello, lady, I think this house is quite familiar, so I took a few more glances. Sorry, is this your home? The familiar face said something so strange that it chilled her. Rose took a step back in confusion, and the smile on her face quickly withdrew. She looked at the man again with caution, and the female mage lowered her voice. Who are you? What do you want to do here? My name is Lester, I come from Ionia. This time I came here to see the greatness of the Immortal Bastion. It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am. If there is nothing else, I will leave now. The man's face was very gentle, but it was also gentle to strangers. Such politeness is very hurtful to acquaintances. Looking at the man's expression, that did not seem to be fake, Rose felt a tearing pain in her heart. She couldn't tell whether the man was acting or really lost his memory. She only knew that she hated this feeling. She originally thought that the relationship between her and the man was maintained by the pleasure of the flesh, but now she understood that some things were not what she took for granted. She wanted to say please. She opened her mouth, but found that she couldn't squeeze out a word. When she tried to make herself look at the man again, her vision was blurred. Wiping the corners of her eyes, she hadn't felt so embarrassed for a long time. You, Rose, I miss you very much, but I don't know if you miss me too. But now I have the answer in my heart. As expected, we are destined to be inseparable. I'm sorry that I made you cry as soon as we met. I'm such a jerk. Being hugged by the man, the female mage trembled in her heart and buried her head in the man's arms. You big liar. I don't want to forgive you. Watching the man pick up the terrible Ms. Rose like a kitten and walk into the mansion, the nearby Black Rose mages all gave the man a thumbs up. What a trick of playing hard to get. What a trick of deceiving the world. As expected of Lord Lester, in this world, I'm afraid only Lord Lester can suppress Ms. Rose. Come on, Lord Lester. It would be best if Ms. Rose couldn't get out of bed for a month. She looks so gloomy all day long, which is scary. After a heartfelt confession and a lingering love, it was already late at night. Lying in the man's arms, looking at the ceiling with a dazed look, the female mage was still savoring the satisfaction she had not experienced for a long time. Rose's mind was a little scattered, and she forced herself to ask the question she had wanted to ask for a long time. How did you manage to conceal your whereabouts in Ionia? It's very simple. I changed my identity that you would never expect. I know that the people of Black Rose and Night's Edge are looking for me. It's still very easy to avoid you. You have been gone for more than 5 years. Are you really not worried that there will be any trouble in your Emerald Constellation? Shaking his head, Lester's hand passed over the female mage's swan-like neck, lingering at the collarbone, making the female mage's breathing become rapid again. This is his favorite place on Rose's body, and this is also Rose's sensitive point. As long as Miss Howe and Hinner are here, as long as the Night's Edge is still here, no one can overturn the existing system of the Emerald Territory. If more than 5 years can expose the Emerald Territory's own fragility and flaws, then I can just make up for it after I come back. What I want is a strong force that can develop stably, not a mirage that will collapse without me. In fact, Margaret and the others did not disappoint me. The strength of the Emerald Territory is beyond doubt, except for the gold coins minted and issued. Gold coins? The numbness from her body made Rose's voice tremble a little. Yes, it's gold coins. Before I left, I clearly told them not to leave my portrait on the gold coins, but they still did it. Although there were some minor changes, it still violated my orders. I think someone should give me an explanation for this matter. If someone has forgotten who founded the Emerald Territory, then I don't mind helping him recall how I treat enemies and traitors. The man's serious voice surprised Rose. Lester, you have grown up again. As long as you are not an incurable fool, people should continue to grow over the years. Unfortunately, sometimes the price paid for growth is too high. It seems that this trip to Ionia has made you go through a lot. But you, my little Rose, you don't seem to have changed. Maybe you are hiding something from me now, but I'm willing to believe you and give you time to truly trust me, Rose. Conspiracies and tricks can indeed allow you to do many things, but there are also many things you can't do. For truly difficult enemies, using strategies is ultimately a side path. Finding some trustworthy companions to face difficulties together is the best choice. The sudden silence made the atmosphere in the room a little weird. Facing the man's temptation, the woman chose to change the subject, which disappointed the man. Obviously, LeBlanc was not ready to show her cards and open her heart. But then again, it was indeed unrealistic to want to change a black witch who had lived for more than 500 years with a few words. Speaking of changes, Lester, your appearance doesn't seem to have changed. The years have left very few traces on your face. Do you know how cruel it is for a woman to watch herself getting older day by day, while her loved ones remain forever young? I just met Margaret and the others a while ago. except for your two little angels and Tally, who studied magic and used all chemical potions to maintain her appearance. Everyone else has become a sallow-faced woman. I'm afraid seeing you like this now. Rose, if they really love me, they would be happy for me instead. Let's not talk about this. There's still some time before dawn. We shouldn't waste it. Sitting up from the bed, Rose's eyes were a little complicated. So, we are leaving at dawn? Nodding, Lester hugged the female wizard. At Margaret's speed, she should be almost at the Goral Mountains now. After being missing for so many years, she needs to see with her own eyes what the army of the Emerald Territory has become. On the west side of the Goral Mountains, a 10,000-man army was moving northward like a tide, passing through several villages, where people were in panic. As a magical bird flew into the hands of the Black Rose Mage, Margaret, riding a purebred horse, received the latest news from the Immortal Fortress's Supreme Command. The reason why it was not an order was that, although the Emerald Territory belonged to Naxos, it had absolute autonomy, and even the Supreme Command was not qualified to issue orders. The male mage responsible for delivering the information quickly approached Margaret on horseback. Speak. Master, the Immortal Fortress's Supreme Command said they will deal with the Hedis heading south, and told us not to bother with those bastards, and to head to Shelly Fortress as planned. Oh, you still have some backbone. Sitting on the silver grey horse armor was a tall woman wearing heavy armor and a thick helmet, with a two-handed flame-shaped sword on her waist. She was Margaret, who commanded the army. Unlike the slightly bulky, difficult to wear and high consumption Blackguard, the new magic steel plate armor made of different metal ratios and magic materials, which was applied with the protective magic developed by Huasishu and other mages, had a lighter weight and better protection, and its resistance to magic was greatly enhanced. The reduced weight made it possible for heavy armored infantry to ride on horses and become heavy armored knights. The new armor was named Dark Blood Raven by the old blacksmith Ristal. It inherited the dark and heavy style of the old predecessor Blackguard. The Dark Blood Raven with Dark Blood Light looks very oppressive. Unfortunately, due to the rare casting materials, even the wealthy Emerald Territory only has a dozen sets. After being distributed to the Legion Commander and the Deputy Legion Commander, there are only a few left. The remaining ones are given to special battle talents. As for the most powerful, Blood Knight, Magic Steel Plate Armor, there is only one set in the entire Emerald Territory. Except for the powerful Demon Face Lord, no one can afford such weight and glory. Report to the Legion Commander. Lady Hiltalia has confirmed that there are no traces of enemies in the mountains within 10 kilometers ahead. As soon as the communication mage left, the scout cavalry came to Margaret against the flow of people. Continue to explore the enemy's traces. Yes. Margaret still values the talents chosen by her followers and her husband Lester. The leader of the reconnaissance cavalry squad is the sinful son of the Blood Amber Courtyard, Hiltalia. As an outstanding talent who ranks first in all assessments, except personal combat power in the Blood Amber Courtyard, Hiltalia joined the Black Iron Guard as she wished. 12 years of military career have made the 19-year-old girl shoulder many responsibilities. This expedition is a good opportunity to gain military merit. In Margaret's view, even the rare talents of generals must go to the front line to kill the enemy in person to grow. No matter how powerful the generals who hide in the rear are, they are just paper talkers and are absolutely unworthy of reuse. Only generals who have fought through mountains of corpses and seas of blood will understand the preciousness of soldiers' lives. This is the truth that Lester taught Margaret, and Margaret has long decided to pass on this rule forever in the Emerald Territory. In order to support Shelly Fortress, leaving aside the more than 20,000 logistics troops, the Emerald Territory dispatched a total of 15,000 soldiers this time. In addition to the regular legion, Naxos Black Iron Guard, there are also many special legions, including Heavy Armored Infantry, Naxos Black Guard, Elite Crossbowmen, Dark Blood Crossbowmen, Siege Troops, Shield Crossbowmen, Mage Troops, Black Lightning, Anti-Cavalry Troops, Thirsty Blood Executioners. And the first battlefield, as a test unit, Dragon Lizard Knight. The Shield Crossbowman unit has a total of about 600 people, and the carriages carry 10 immortal shield bows made of magic steel and hundreds of special crossbow arrows, including magic steel crossbow arrows for sieges and all chemical crossbow arrows for killing personnel. There are about 300 bloodthirsty executioners, who are selected from the tall death row prisoners who have won more than 5 consecutive victories in the Emerald Territory arena. Each of the battle-hardened death row prisoners has been cursed by the Black Rose Curse Mage. The consequences of disobeying orders and escaping without authorization have long made the death row prisoners understand that fighting bravely on the battlefield is their only way to survive. The special magic equipment on their bodies is enough to give the executioners the courage to counterattack the cavalry. In fact, even the bravest cavalry would choose to retreat when facing a 2-meter-long enchanted double-edged axe. The number of dragon lizard knights is around 200. After years of careful domestication and cultivation, the wild dragon lizards in the quiet forest have been initially domesticated and equipped in the army. Unlike their petite and exquisite distant cousin Scare, each dragon lizard is as indestructible as a small tank. The weight of 1 to 2 tons and the invulnerable scales are enough to make most attacks useless. In addition, the spiked iron armor specially made for each dragon lizard by the Emerald Territory War Workshop to protect the vital parts of the body and enhance the impact lethality. Even the elite blackguards have to admit that, even if they have twice the number of dragon lizard knights, they will only become a pool of meat mud under the feet of the dragon lizards if they confront the dragon lizard knights head on. There will be no other result. The dragon lizard under the crotch is scary enough, and the knight on the back of the dragon lizard is even more daunting. The knight wearing fine iron plate armor carries 3 weapons, a giant lance, a one-handed saber and a mechanical crossbow. The reason why it is not equipped with a blackguard made of magic steel is that the Emerald Territory no longer has many Aurich alchemy ingots. The 2.5 meter long, 70-pound fine iron lance cannot be held by hand at all. Even a carefully selected and extremely powerful knight must mount the lance on the gun rack on the right side of the dragon lizard's neck. Together with the dragon lizard's spiked helmet, it becomes a sharp knife to tear open the enemy's line. The saber with a deliberately lengthened handle is for the convenience of chasing and killing fleeing enemies. As for the mechanical crossbow built with pulleys, it makes up for the dragon lizard knight's slow charge speed and short attack range. Even when facing cavalry that come and go like the wind, the dragon lizard knight can use the mechanical crossbow to shoot the enemy off the horse and avoid being killed by guerrilla warfare. Chapter 355 The Soul of Noxus. In the deep caves between the cols of the Goral Mountains, Mosley, with hundreds of Hedi elite mages, was staring at the images transmitted from the magic crystal, watching the terrifying army that stretched for more than 10 miles gradually go away. Even through the magic gods, the Hedi people present felt a suffocating sense of oppression, but Mosley didn't care and even took a few puffs of his pipe, puffing out smoke. He was not worried about what the army heading to Shelly Fortress could do. In fact, in the Hedi people's plan to conquer the continent, the defenders in Shelly Fortress have never been the most important link, not even the Narxans. On the Valoran continent, except for the senior generals of the Hedi people, no one knows what the Hedi people want to do, and no one knows what the Hedi people want to get. There has never been any betrayal. From the beginning to the end, the Hedi people have never formed an alliance with anyone. The Narxans who gave gifts just wishful thinking that the Hedi people who received gifts would not launch an attack. Norsk Castle is already under our control. This army from the Emerald Territory will never waste time on Norsk Castle. Relying on the supplies we have obtained from looting the village, our 30,000 soldiers are enough to garrison Norsk Castle for more than a few months. If the Narxans still want the defenders of Shelly Fortress to survive, they will not waste time anywhere. Let those frail-jawed barbarians worry about it. At the appropriate time, Lord Gurgle will withdraw his troops. My lord, what should we do next? Asked a shrewd middle-aged man with a mustache. Of course, we will use Norsk Castle as a base and find the second ruins as soon as possible. Mosley pinched off the picture in the magic crystal and tapped his feet with his pipe. According to the judgment of the detection crystal, the second ruins are just under this mountain. We need to find it and then uncover its secrets unknowingly. In the first ruins, we learned how to practice and use energy magic. Energy magic allows every Hedi to become an extraordinary wizard. If the information in the ruins is correct, the magic ruins under the Goral Mountains should contain ancient knowledge of energy crystals. As long as we have energy crystals, we can get a steady supply of mana replenishment, and no longer have to worry about excessive mana consumption. By then, no force in Valoran will be our opponent. Every Hedi next to the energy crystal will become a great wizard with infinite mana. Valoran will soon become the back garden of Arhedis. No matter whether it is the Narxans, Dimatians or Friljordians, they will all be slaves of Arhedis. We will usher in an era of energy magic that has never been seen in the history of Valoran. Hearing what Mosley said, the Hedis present showed excited and fanatical expressions on their faces. Praise the wise and brave Lord Keylethur. Long live Hedi. Very good. Understanding your mission is only the first step. Following the footsteps of Lord Keylethur, we will become the supreme rulers of Valoran. Now you can disperse and use the detection crystals in your hands to find any crypts you can go deep into. Once you find anything, use magic to contact at any time. Yes. In Northenberg, a rare dinner party is being held. As a pigeon was carried into the castle by a messenger, the atmosphere in the banquet hall instantly became much colder. Alice took out the letter paper processed with alchemical materials from the pigeon's mailbox, took the special potion handed by the messenger, soaked it in fire, and roasted it for about 3 minutes, and the Narxan language appeared on the letter paper. After a glance, Alice frowned. At noon today, the commander of the army arrived at the north side of Fort Misset. The Hedis heading south did not seem to have any intention of harassing or intercepting the commander of the army. They just occupied Fort Norsca without making any move. So far, we still don't know what the Hedis' intentions are. Alice, I say you'd better relax a little. Putting his feet on the edge of the table, Krell lazily leaned on the back of the high-legged chair and took a sip of blackthorn honey wine. Well, except for a little sweetness, there is no taste. What a chicken feather wine. Krell cursed inwardly and gulped down another sip. When Margaret solves the enemies besieging Fort Shelley, the Hedis in Fort Norsca will only be the what idiot fish in the jar. Master Krell, it's Turtle, and Turtle is not a fish, it's the turtle. A senior officer of the Emerald Territory present added with a smile, and Krell patted his thigh happily. Yes, yes, yes. You said the turtle in the jar. Alice, I really don't know what you are worried about every day. You even make a dinner party so serious, and you can't even eat peacefully. Alice and other Emerald Lords have always been very tolerant of the carefree Yodel Kled. In fact, Kled's own strength has long been recognized by most people. What you said makes sense. Maybe I worry too much. Maybe the Hedi people dare not act rashly, because they see the terrifying Emerald Lord Legion. That's right. Eat meat and drink wine. After being pulled by Kled to drink 2 glasses, Alice walked out of the castle banquet hall. That was lively again. Northumberland was built on the Dalmor Plain, with a very wide view, easy to defend, and difficult to attack. The vast grassland made Northumber a stubborn male, deeply rooted in the ground and standing still. As long as a small fortress was built more than 50 miles to the east to form a pincer attack with Northumber, Northumber would become the only entrance and exit to the north and south of the Dalmor Plain. In fact, if it were not for the detour from the easternmost Carrier Sandville, the Hedi people heading south would not have left Northumber's site. They went to great lengths to mobilize a large number of troops to bypass Northumber and secretly go south, slaughtering more than a dozen villages, driving innocent villagers to attack Norsca Castle at the northern foot of the Goral Mountains. They tossed around for most of the day, just to occupy a secondary fortress that could be cut off at any time. All the actions of the Hedi people seemed to be covered with a thick fog. Although Alice told Krell and others not to think about it anymore, she still couldn't let it go. Years of experience on the battlefield made her understand that when you don't understand why the enemy has strange actions, it means that your enemy has already put a knife on your neck. There is only one kind of fool in the world, and that is the guy who thinks others are fools. If it is to weaken Narxus's war potential, the actions of slaughtering villages and attacking cities and destroying fields can be understood. But what do you want to do, Hedi people? It was obviously a beautiful night with bright moon and stars, but Alice felt a little chilly. Under the same cold moon, a pile of corpses 3 meters high had accumulated under the wall of Shelley Fortress. Fire. As the order was issued, the gunner loosened the taut gun rope. The next second, the muzzle of the catapult, the elastic and long wooden rod connecting the magazine and the gun shaft, made a heavy whistling sound, and after crossing a semicircular arc, the round stone with a diameter of about 1 meter was hugged by the magazine, and flew to the fortress standing in the distance between the mountains. More than a dozen stones flew towards the city wall at the same time, making the Narcs and defenders hiding in the corner of the battlement on the city wall scare their souls. Even the frail-jawed warriors who were climbing the ladder stopped their movements, raised their small leather shields, and prayed that they were not in the direction of the falling stones. The heavy sound of collapsing rang out one after another. The cracked battlements were accurately hit by the stones, and several Narcs and soldiers hiding behind the battlements were rotten to pieces. Just one round of artillery fire turned dozens of Narcs and soldiers and a dozen frail-jawed people into cold and broken corpses. Even so, the frail-jawed catapult gunners continued to reset the catapults. The battering rams, rolling stones and boiling gold juice had already run out in the high-intensity battle. The archers on the city wall didn't care about their fingers that had been cut and bleeding by the bowstrings. They carefully put the few arrows on the bowstrings and tried their best to take away the next target on the bowstring. Both the attackers and defenders were in a state of absolute madness. Hold your ground. Follow me to kill the enemy. The commander of the war group, who had lost one arm, drew out the long sword from his waist, roared at the top of his lungs, and chopped off half of the frail-jawed man's head that had just appeared on the ladder. Regardless of his face, that was already covered in blood and brain, the commander stabbed the barbarian warrior in the abdomen. The general kicked him in the abdomen, and the barbarian warrior fell backwards, wailing in pain, and hitting a companion who had not had time to dodge. Kill them. The broken wall revealed a gap more than 3 meters wide. The partitions of the frail-jawed siege tower were slowly lowered towards the gap in the wall. Behind the fireproof cowhide partitions were several trolls wearing simple iron armor. The trolls bound by iron chains waved their maces and rushed onto the collapsed wall. They knocked the 4 Narcs and soldiers with spears far away like autumn wind sweeping fallen leaves. Their bodies were pierced by the iron spikes on the maces, and they died directly. Wow. Eat. Delicious. I want to eat more. Picking up a broken human leg, the troll happily opened his mouth and made a crunching sound in the terrified eyes of the Narcs and soldiers. More than a dozen arrows that avoided the iron armor penetrated into the troll's thick skin, which did not affect the troll's feasting at all. The Iceborn warlock, who was controlling the trolls with forbidden magic, hid behind the siege tower and cast frost magic at the Narcs and soldiers, who were about to shoot arrows from a higher position. A silent cold current blew over, and the abundant ice element quickly attached to the city walls in the condensation of magic. After about 5 seconds, it suddenly broke out, and the several meter-long ice spikes that rose from the ground easily pierced the iron-studded leather armor that Narcissus was proud of. The corpse hung in the middle of the ice spikes, and the blood quickly turned the beautiful blue ice crystals into a sad crimson. Just when the frail-jawed people gained the upper hand, a strong smell of sulfur wafted from the air, and a huge magic circle formed from a height of more than 10 meters. Dozens of scattered fire element expanded rapidly, illuminating the night sky in just a dozen seconds. Master Mage, help me. Many clever frail-jawed people began to move closer to the siege tower, where the ice warlock was, and the ice warlock let the trolls block the tower as a wall, and cast frost magic to completely freeze the entire tower. Watching the people before him run into the tower that was not completely closed, was frozen by the ice wall in the next second. The desperate frail-jawed warriors looked up at the increasingly bright fireballs. Hundreds of towering flames fell from the sky and hit the ground. Within a radius of 5 miles, there were fireballs representing destruction and tyranny everywhere. Wailing, screaming, and sobbing came one after another, accompanied by the smell of roasted meat with the aroma of crispy oil, which rushed into their brains all at once, until a ball of flames fell straight from the sky, and their hair began to burn, emitting the stench of burning protein. Lady Chelina, the frail-jawed warrior who turned into a human-shaped fireball, was ultimately unable to express his reverence, and became a charred mass. The fireballs continued to hit the frozen siege tower, but ultimately failed to break the ice magic of the Iceborn warlock. The range of the meteor shower was blocked outside the fortress wall by the Black Rose Mage. In the flames, the Narcsans got a precious chance to breathe. Finally, under the order of the commander of the chapter, General Vacal, the Narxan soldiers on the inner curtain wall replaced the soldiers on the outermost curtain wall who had suffered heavy casualties, giving the surviving soldiers a little more hope for life. Many new soldiers saw the one-armed general with his back to them, with his long sword with a rolled blade sticking on the ground facing the meteor shower, and heard the general's hoarse and powerful voice. "Narxus, never retreat." Respectful eyes focused on the body that stood firm. In the eyes of many Narxan soldiers, the one-armed general at this moment was more worthy of respect than the Black Rose mage who saved the battle. "Lord Pyrrhus, we can go and rest for a while," a soldier whispered to Pyrrhus, but Pyrrhus remained indifferent. He just stood quietly on the wall, looking at the forbidden magic that was beginning to shrink. "Lord Pyrrhus?" Finally, a soldier mustered up the courage to come to the one-armed general, but what he saw was a body full of holes and a face with wide open eyes. Pyrrhus's breastplate had long been shattered, and a small animal bone dagger was inserted in the crack. Blood was seeping from the heart. There was no doubt that the bone knife of the Freljord was the fatal wound that took Pyrrhus' life. Facing the shining meteor shower, the stinking Pyrrhus's only remaining arm was still strong, his palm full of knife marks pressed on the long sword, and the bearded general looked down at the countless Freljord people who turned into charcoal under the city wall. "What's wrong with Lord Pyrrhus?" The soldier with blurred vision stopped others who wanted to approach Pyrrhus. Although the general fell asleep, he is still guarding Narxus. After a pause, looking at his colleagues with red eyes around him, the soldier gritted his teeth and wiped the corners of his eyes. "Let the general rest in peace, everyone. Tears are the cheapest thing a Narxan soldier has. We will help the general finish the rest of Narxus' glorious journey." */the main text is 4,300 words. The extra words will not be charged extra due to insufficient quantity. In order to avoid that some people will not see them, they can only be written in the main text. Dear readers, I'm so tired. The more I write this book, the less confident I am. Judging from the follow-up reading data, not many people read this book anymore. To say that it is a book to support is really no different from abandoning it. People don't even read it after the 5th volume is finished. Do people really want to support it until it reaches 2 million words before they are willing to get into it? The author can't stand it anymore. The highest subscription is nearly 3,000, and the average subscription is only 600, which is far from half of it. I can't even get an average subscription of 1,000 after writing for half a year. I can't even participate in the 515 explosive update event. The website said that I'm not eligible. It's so frustrating, so frustrating. If I cut this book off, will anyone send me local specialties? Crying. Chapter 356 Countermeasures against magic suppression. He is a hero. We must let other Narxans know about Pyrrhus's courage. The Romus family will be proud of Pyrrhus. Jeffers, go and put Pyrrhus' body on my bed. We still have a long battle to fight. In the dungeon of Shelley Fortress, in the gate fort near the underground river, General Vacal, with a bloody face, put away the cross sword that had been wiped dry, took out a Baroque cigar from his bag, put it on the torch and ignited it, and put it directly in his blood-stained mouth. The strong nicotine taste diluted the fishy taste in his mouth, making Vacal more sober. "General, do you really want to put it on your bed? Or put it on the ground?" Adjutant Jeffers was still a little hesitant. Glancing at his nephew, Vacal said lightly, "Pyrrhus fought to death under my orders. He is an Narxan battle hero. It is my honor, not my shame, to let him sleep in my bed. Go, Jeffers, don't let me say it again." Naturally, he didn't dare to raise any more objections, and Jeffers ran into the castle. Vacal glanced at the other dozen or so soldiers in the gate fort and suddenly raised his voice, so that soldiers farther away could also hear the convincing voice deep in the darkness. "Look, Pyrrhus has set an example for all of us. This is the iron will of true Narxans. Both the Freljordians and the Hedis can chop off our butcher knives, but they can cut off our bodies, but they can't cut off our unyielding souls. Even in the face of twice as many enemies, we have never had any fear. How hard is the curtain wall of Shelley Fortress? How hard is our heart, our backbone? Cowards have never had anything to do with Narxus. Even if they die, Narxans will use their hard bones to break the sharp knives in the hands of the enemy. Victory always belongs to the warriors who are not afraid of life and death. Soldiers, hold the swords in your hands tightly. Guard the backs of your comrades. Let those foreign cowards who only dare to bully the few with their numbers see how stupid it is to provoke the crazy Narxans. Cut off their heads. Let them understand the price of offending the strong. Narxus. Invincible. Narxus. Never retreat. Kill. 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 Vanna had just led dozens of people out of the tunnel and saw the Narxans who were as fierce as wolves and tigers. He was dumbfounded for a moment. Is it the Narxans or the Freljords who are attacking the city? Yes. You are the idiot with your eyes wide open. What are you looking at? I will chop off your head. With a roar, the Narxans actually stopped guarding the narrow gate fort and ran through the steep narrow stone road to kill the tunnel. Back off. Back off. No, guard the entrance. Don't push me. Who is pushing me? Those who retreat without permission will die. The formation of the Freljords was a bit messy, but fortunately Vanna reorganized the formation with a fine iron sword in his hand. After thinking for a while, Vanna began to yell in the awkward Narxan language. Shelly Fortress, now, Pearls. Now, put down your weapons. Spare you, no shit. Who would have thought that the words of persuasion not only did not work, but made most of the Narxans even crazier. A bunch of lunatics. At the same time, in the other direction of Shelly Fortress, overwhelming energy magic flew from the bottom of the city wall like Katasha rockets. Energy arrows cut through the night sky and suddenly exploded on the barrier, making a deafening explosion. In order to deal with the Hedi people who could cast spells, most of the mages in the Shelly Fortress garrison were placed in the direction of the Hedi people. It turned out that this was a very wise choice. 15 Black Rose mages cast spells together, and another 10 mages were on standby at any time. The arc-shaped spell barrier that covered 2/3 of the thick city wall was crumbling in the blasting energy, and visible cracks began to spread. Fortunately, the Black Rose mages on standby replenished their mana in time and repaired the cracks. Standing on the middle section of the outermost curtain wall, Roy felt insecure at this moment, even though he was wearing the full-body steel plate armor given to him by his father. Even though he had experienced many magical bombardments by the Hedis in Shelly Fortress, he had never seen such a terrible magical attack. The conventional war experience taught by his father was completely useless in the battle with the wizard. He couldn't even touch the corner of the enemy's clothes, and the soldiers' arrows could only shoot at the enemy's feet. How could he fight this battle? General Roy, this is not a solution. The Hedis magic power can be restored, but we can only passively take the beating. The soldiers will soon collapse. Roy patted his confused face and quickly calmed down and calmed himself. The man turned around and looked at the soldier who was talking to him. The man in his 40s was 1.9 meters tall and weighed 180 kilograms. He was burly, wearing black iron scale armor made by the immortal Fortress Furnace, and was good at using a two-handed broadsword. Priest was a veteran who had fought hundreds of battles and was arranged by his father Ursus. The white beard on his chin was as hard as a steel needle, just like the veteran's tenacious will. As his military teacher, the veteran was also the only reliable guard who could protect him on the battlefield. Knowing that the veteran was testing him, Roy expressed his thoughts. Teacher Roy, our arrows can't hit the Hedis at all. Only by letting our soldiers rush into the enemy's formation can we prevent those damn wizards from releasing magic at will. But there are not many cavalrymen in our Ursus regiment. Even if we open the side door, we can't break through the enemy's magic attack. So, we should give up the outermost curtain wall. Find a way to let the Hedis enter the city and attack them in the narrow city. General Roy, do you mean to give up the city wall? Priest stared at Roy without blinking. What comforted him was that he didn't see any fear or panic. Although he was still a little immature on the severe battlefield, Roy already looked like a general. After being taught a lesson by Vakal, Roy changed for the better. Lord Ursus probably owes General Vakal a favor. Priest sighed secretly, but Royce said, of course not. If we'll evacuate the city wall, the Hedis will stop attacking. We must make the Hedis consume enough mana so that we can gain an advantage in the subsequent battles and gradually reduce the magical defense barrier of the city wall. During this time, we must find a way to make the Hedis think that we are still on the city wall. I think the wooden dummy should be a good choice. From the comments in the previous chapter, it can be seen that the Ionia chapter, which focuses on the adventure plot, is quite a failure. In the subsequent plots, I will try my best to reduce the length of the adventure, and it will not be as long as the 5th volume. As for the update problem, I really can't update it without motivation. There is no vacation when I'm on a business trip or working on an engineering project. There will be no holidays for May 1st National Day, Dragon Boat Festival and Qingming Festival. If I don't have any manuscripts, I will write and publish it one day at a time. It is already the limit to maintain an update of 4,000 words a day. I still have to stay up until 11 or 12 o'clock. What's more, with the current performance and income of novels, it is not realistic for me to take writing as my main job. Finally, I did see everyone's comments and support, and I have some confidence and hope for the future of this book. In order to make it appear that there are more chapters, I decided to change it back to 2 chapters a day. I hope that, if you keep subscribing to the book, it will not exceed 1 month at most. If it exceeds 1 month, it is best to turn on automatic subscription. The subscription data is the source of my confidence in writing, and it also allows me to know where I write well, and where I have problems, so that I can keep improving. At least it lets me know that there are still people reading this book. If no one reads it, I don't know whether it is good or not, and I really can't write anymore. In fact, my pursuit is not high. If I don't have money to subscribe, even if it's just a recommendation vote or a few useful comments, I just want to know that there are readers accompanying me. Brushing up my sense of presence is the greatest encouragement to me. I will sneakily read everyone's comments when I'm slacking off. This is a rare happy time for me. Chapter 357 The Queen of Forkeld. Lord Guga, their mages seem to be running out of mana. Should we intensify our offensive? 3 miles away from Shelley Fortress, a rectangular formation of 5,000 people was continuously releasing energy magic towards Shelley Fortress in batches, and the other 5,000 people were waiting for orders as a reserve. Regarding the words of Windsor, his most proud subordinate who he had trained himself, Guga, the bald man, did not comment, and reached his hand to the back of his female subordinate. While Lord Guga the gentlewoman had a standard heady face, with clear and bright light green pupils, a good figure, and delicate skin. The only thing that made Guga a little dissatisfied was that Windsor was given to him by the heady city Lord Kalyasa, which meant that the beautiful woman already had her first owner. When she came to him, the woman was no longer perfect. Obviously, the lord of the city exercised his inalienable right to the first night. Even after his second training, the woman could not completely erase the ideological imprint of the first owner, which made Guga very unhappy. That's why, facing the woman who was panting slightly, Guga chose to press the issue and directly use the magic trick, forcing Windsor to cover her mouth in humiliation, to prevent herself from making inappropriate noises. Little beauty, we don't need to do much. It's enough to drag these Narxons here, and let the Friljordians attack the city. Since it's Caspar's idea to catch the turtle in the jar, let them bleed. Whether it's Narxus or the Frost Kingdom, the more bloodshed, the better. We just need to contain the Narxons here and prevent Narxus from fully dealing with the Frost Kingdom under safe conditions. But, instead of worrying about these, you might as well serve me well. Well, Google was too lazy to say anything more and directly used the silencing spell on Windsor, forcing Windsor to swallow the words in his mouth along with other things. After conquering the various tribes in the Dalmor Plain, the cold wind that ruled the Dalmor Plain established its own kingdom and used Forkeld as its capital. Forkeld was built on the ruins of a dilapidated ancient city. It was called a city, but in fact it was just a simple fortress. In order to save construction time, many places in Forkeld replaced the broken stones with hard blue ice, making Forkeld look a bit out of place. In the eyes of most people, it is not so much a kingdom as it is a northern barbarian who occupied a ruin and became a local emperor in the ravine. Especially this emperor is a queen. Sitting on the mahogany throne in the center of the simple palace, Yelena, wearing a fur robe, stepped on the back of the heads of 2 men whose limbs were chained with chains with her bare feet. The crow's feet of the Queen of the Frost Kingdom were particularly conspicuous after frowning. No matter how many times she looked at it, Yelena was very dissatisfied with her situation. Such a palace was too much worse than the place where her real master lived. Unfortunately, the current Falkland is the limit of what she can do. If she continues to build and repair Falkland, the Frost Kingdom, which is already in danger and can only rely on the supply of the Frostgird clan to barely feed the army and the people, will collapse in an instant. She knows that her master can tolerate her using her power to do some small things, but will never allow her to delay her master's own big things because of personal matters. It is what she must do to prevent Narxus from continuing to expand northward. The reason why she is the queen of the Frost Kingdom is just because she is a loyal dog of the witch. Jelena has always been very clear about this, just like the reason why she appointed Casper as the marshal of the kingdom is because Casper is her favorite dog. She is trying to learn her master's style of doing things, including the palace where she lives. Owen, how is our war with Narxus going? A foolish old woman who only knows how to pamper men. You still know how to ask about the war. Dear Queen, please allow me to explain it to you in detail. Owen, who was standing at the bottom of the steps, secretly slandered his husband and monarch in his heart, knelt on his knees, and put his forehead on the cold floor tiles. He knew that compared with people who were truly capable of doing things, the old woman in front of him liked these empty flattery, which was why the more capable Eaton commanded the sheepdogs on the pasture, while he could serve in the palace. With a slightly relaxed expression, Jelena looked at her handsome wife who had been neglected by her for half a month, and raised her hand. Get up and talk, Owen, come to me. Yes, my queen. Owen, who received the order, stood up and came to Queen Jelena with a respectful face, picked up the foot handed to him by the queen, and kissed the instep lightly, while suppressing his nausea, with an intoxicated and reluctant expression on his face. Even after being cleaned many times by the disgusting slaves' tongues, the woman's ugly and huge soul still had a sour smell. As an iceborn warrior who had fought for most of her life, Jelena's feet had long been suffocated by her combat boots. But the old woman liked others to kiss her stinky feet, as if this was the only way to reflect her supreme status. Because of this, all the men in the palace of Fokeld had different degrees of bad breath, except for him who had never licked her feet. Gently placing his right foot on the back of the slave's head again, letting the sole of his foot step on the slave's already somewhat deformed cervical vertebrae, Owen said in a deep voice, "At present, General Casper has achieved significant results. Although there have been some casualties, the Narxan soldiers in Shelly Fortress have no way to retreat." General Casper said that 6 of the 8 most critical underground nodes in Shelly Fortress have completed the true ice. Once they are fully arranged, Master Gilina can turn Shelly Fortress into ruins at any time. Very good. Casper did not disappoint me. After thinking for a while, Jelena opened her mouth and ordered, "The Hedi people have no good intentions. Before destroying Shelly Fortress, let more Hedi and Narxan people die, and let Casper be more wary of the Hedi people. After the Shelly Fortress is destroyed, bring all my soldiers back, and let the Hedi and Narxan people fight. Yes. Retreat." Coming out of the simple palace, the smile on Owen's respectful face showed some irony. "My noble Queen Jelena, you don't really think that everyone is willing to flatter you, right? Compared to being a slave without dignity, I think Narxus is more suitable for me." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358, The Frost Witch of the Freljord. While the battle at Shelly Fortress was going on like crazy, the solemn and magnificent Frostgird Fortress in the northern icefield of Freljord became tense again. In the True Ice Council chamber, under the Eternal Ice Palace, the Watchers, composed of the most powerful Ice Warlocks, were discussing matters related to the seal of the Void Watcher under the leadership of the Frost Witch, Ice Queen Lysandra. The council chamber, decorated with magic fluorite, was in a gloomy blue tone. The ceiling was made of ice blue glazed ice crystals, and all the glazed ice crystals formed a one-eyed symbol symbolizing the monitoring of the void. A huge ancient magic circle was engraved on the blue-gray stone slab on the ground. 52 armchairs made temporarily by true ice guarded the most honorable frozen throne. On the frozen throne sat the Frost Witch, wearing a mask with only her pink lips exposed. As a new Ice Warlock who had joined the Watcher Assembly for less than half a year, Grace was also experiencing such a heavy and ancient meeting for the first time. Even the true ice armchair under her, but was newly made by the Honorable Frost Witch, which made her feel very uncomfortable. The true ice, which used to be palm-sized enough to make the war mothers of various clans ecstatic, seemed to be of little value here. The key point is, can such a precious thing really be used as a butt pad? Grace, relax a little. I'm very sure that there are no terrible thorns on the chair I made for you. Yes, Honorable Witch. Being personally named by the Frost Witch, in the kind smile of her companions, Grace, with a blushing face, could only force herself to sit on the great true ice armchair, put her hands folded in front of her lower abdomen, and secretly appreciate the witch's power and gift. All the iceborn warlocks in the Watcher Assembly knew who the witch sitting on the frozen throne was. As one of the 3 Frost sisters who led humans to rebel against the old gods in ancient times, the Frost Witch Lysandra was the greatest queen in the history of Freljord in terms of both strength and reputation. If the truth of being buried by the true ice spread, the entire Freljord would submit to the rule of the queen again. Even the Avarosa clan, which inherited the legacy of Queen Avarosa, and the Winterclaw clan, which inherited the legacy of Queen Cyrilda, had no heirs who could suppress the Frost Witch, who was of the same generation as their ancestors. In addition, the power that the Frostguard clan had secretly accumulated over the past 1,000 years meant that no one could stand in front of the Frost Witch. Unfortunately, for some reason, the Frost Witch had no intention of doing so and always said that the time was not right. In the secular sense, Lysandra is one of the 3 remaining Ice Sisters in Freljord, and the Queen of Freljord. However, in the sense of Ice Warlocks, Lysandra only allows others to call her a witch, not the queen. No one knows the reason for this. I believe you all know the reason for holding this gathering of the Watchers. The frost is about to melt. We need to check the seal of the void and repair it if necessary. When Lysandra was speaking, no one interrupted, but it was inevitable that she was a little more uneasy. There is a 3 in 52 chance of being selected. It is not a big deal, but it is not a small deal. There are not a few Ice Warlocks who died in the Hall of Nine, but there are also many who walked out safely. In general, this cannot be said to be a mission to die, but no one is willing to do it. In the unspeakable silence, Lysandra sighed and stood up from the throne. Matilda, Angela, Adeline, this time you will complete the task of maintaining the seal. The 3 sorceresses whose names were called also stood up and saluted the witch on the throne. Yes, Master Witch. The date is set in 8 days. After the gathering is over, make some preparations during this time. Yes. Knowing that the Frost Witch had left them the opportunity to deal with the afterlife and enjoy their last days, the 3 did not say much and sat on the Zenbing chair again. The last time someone died was 6 years ago, so they were not too worried about their turn. Sitting back on the throne, Lysandra's cold voice echoed in the meeting hall again. Just a month ago, the sealed Void Watcher became active again. This time I have found the reason that affects the Void Watcher's sleep. Somewhere in Valoran, there is a special soul that has mastered the power of Valoran's runes. The power of runes is like a soul amplifier that allows the Watcher to sense the location of the special soul. It is this special soul that makes the Void Watcher begin to become restless. It is not clear what exactly caused the Void Watcher to notice that special soul, but there is no doubt that this is why the seal of the true ice will deteriorate faster. Hearing Lysandra say this, Matilda, Angela and Adeline's faces suddenly turned extremely pale. If being selected to go to the Hall of Nine to maintain the seal is not necessarily dead, going to the Howling Abyss when the Void Watcher is restless is a life and death situation. Glancing at the 3 Ice Warlocks whose faces had changed, Lysandra continued expressionlessly. The Frost Kingdom established by Jelena is of little significance, but it did play a role in hindering the expansion of Naxos. Unfortunately, the Hedi people still discovered the ancient ruins of the Atlantean magical civilization, and they also mastered the Atlanteans' practice and release of attributeless magic. The Hedi people have become a greater threat than the Naxans. Having said this, Lysandra stopped talking, and a warlock asked, Lady Witch, do we need to interfere with the Hedis? No, we just need to spread the news that the Hedis have discovered the remains of Atlan's magical civilization, and naturally someone will understand what the Hedis are looking for. Although Atlan's attributeless magic is very powerful, if the corresponding magic crystal energy tower manufacturing technology is not obtained, the attributeless magic energy can only be used to deal with mortal armies. Taking into account the emerging Emerald territory, Naxxas's war potential should not be underestimated. With Naxxas around, the Hedis ambitions will never succeed. Then, Lady Witch, what if Naxxas or other forces defeat the Hedis and happen to obtain the manufacturing technology of the energy tower? Will it pose a threat to us? No. Faced with the question of another ice wall lock, Lysandra shook her head. More than 900 years ago, I witnessed with my own eyes the destruction of the last magic crystal energy tower that could kill demigods by the gods. The capital of Atlantis was also destroyed by the endless blazing fire from outer space. The earth was torn apart, magma erupted, the towers were reduced to ruins, and the mountains sank into deep valleys. Ladies and gentlemen, those high gods above us have never stopped monitoring the earth. The manufacturing process of the energy tower has long been erased by the gods. Those gods will never allow weapons that can threaten the gods to be in the hands of mortals, so anyone who wants to obtain the energy tower technology through the Atlan ruins is just wasting their efforts. Chapter 359 The Fate of the Watcher. Compared with the energy tower technology of the Atlans and the Hedis, the special souls that cause the Void Watchers to be restless are the most important thing. Even if such people are not in the Valoran continent, there is a high probability that they will cause a void disaster. Lysandra changed the topic and said in a deep voice, no matter who the other party is, such a person must be in our hands. The other party has a certain world rune and should have some strength. If you are sure, you can directly erase it. If you are not sure enough, remember not to alert the enemy. Witch Grace, do you have any ideas? The little witch raised her right hand and said weakly, speaking of runes, is it possible that it is the Riz mage who collects runes? Looking at the still immature ice wall lock, Lysandra recalled a period of time when she was with her sister in the past, and the corners of the witch's mouth rarely had a few war marks. Thousands of years ago, she had also carefully told her sister about her little discovery. The warmth was only fleeting, and the moment she opened her mouth, the witch's face once again returned to the eternal silence of pure ice. It's not Master Riz, I'm sure of this. Although Master Riz also has runes and controls part of the power of runes, the Void Watcher has no interest in Riz. Although Riz is special, he is not special enough. It's not just runes that attract the Watcher, there are other things as well. My Lady Witch, so, are we going to the south to find that special soul? How should we confirm the target? The Ice Wall Lock Church, who had not spoken, stood up. The old man respectfully bowed to the Frost Witch. Lysandra nodded and motioned the old man to sit down. Lysandra gave enough respect to the old man of the Watcher Assembly who was over 60 years old, had entered the Hall of the 945 times, and was not affected by the Watcher at all, and was extremely wise and capable. That's right, Warlock Church, I'm going to let you lead the team to the south, to find this special soul. This is the key to finding the soul. As she spoke, Lysandra took out a thumb-sized dark purple spherical crystal from somewhere. The dim crystal ball emitted an ominous and enchanting purple-red light under the refraction of the fluorite light. This is a void crystal made by extracting the void energy of the monitor. The void crystal has recorded the soul fluctuations that cause the monitor to be restless. The closer to the target, the brighter the light emitted by the crystal. When it touches the other party's body, cracks will appear. As long as the other party does not leave the Valoran continent, you can find that special soul with it. Remember, you should reduce the number of times you use the void crystal as much as possible. Although I have purified the void will carried in the void energy, there is still a risk of being eroded by the void when using it. I understand, which, I will use it carefully. Putting the void crystal in the prepared true ice box, Lysandra pushed with her right hand, and a layer of thin ice appeared out of thin air under the box. The thin ice tilted downward, pointing precisely in the direction of the old man, carrying the true ice box sliding down. The thin ice stayed beside the old man's raised right hand, allowing the true ice box that slid all the way to fall perfectly into the old man's hand. The moment the carrier was lost, the thin ice path in the air dispersed into a cool ice mist. This superb frost magic directly made the eyes of Grace, who worshipped the Frost Witch, show little stars, but the next second, the little stars were replaced by shock. Catherine, Grace, you will go all the way with Church, and assist Church Warlock to complete the task. If the target is too difficult, you can sacrifice your body to lure the target to the Frostguard fortress and I will solve it myself. Remember, you must complete the task at all costs. If you can't solve this trouble, more ice warlocks will die for him. Hearing the two assistants appointed by the Frost Witch, Church couldn't help but sigh that the witch was too thoughtful. On the other side, after being surprised, Grace noticed that Matilda, Angela and Adeline had regained their calm faces, but their eyes were filled with death. She couldn't help but recall the days when she was taken care of by the three seniors when she first came, and her eyes began to mist. She finally realized that the people she was familiar with might die in the maintenance mission. Yes, Master Witch, we will complete the task at all costs. Catherine, who had a beautiful face and a slender and tall figure, quietly reminded Grace, who was short, but unusually plump, and cute and sweet. Grace, quickly respond to Master Witch. How long do you want Master Witch to wait for you? Oh, Master Witch, I will try my best. Wiping away her tears, Grace clenched her fists. Very good, adjourn the meeting. Glancing around at the warlocks present, and taking in their performance, Lysandre turned and left. Woo woo woo. Matilda, Angela, Sister Adeline, will you? After saying goodbye to the three ice warlocks who were about to carry out the task of repairing the seal, the few people who had some friendship followed the rest of the ice warlocks and left the meeting room. Church sighed, leaving time for the little girl who had not experienced too many separations and deaths, packed the true icebox, and walked out first. There are always things that need to be faced, although the real growth process is often accompanied by unrelieved pains. Whether it is joy or sorrow, it is a part of life. Grace, don't cry for us. Touching the head of the junior, Matilda wiped the little girl's tears with a silk scarf. From the day we passed the selection of ice warlocks and joined the Watcher Assembly, we have been ready to welcome the arrival of this day. If it weren't for us, someone else would have repaired the seal. The void threatens the entire continent. Such responsibilities and missions have been borne by the witch for thousands of years. Now it's just our turn. Someone will always pay the price for this. This is an unavoidable fate. You should be proud of us. The sorceress Adeline, who used to behave frivolously and have a chaotic private life, now looks very dignified and serious. The sorceress held Grace's hand and spoke in an especially gentle tone. Grace, don't learn to live a dissolute life like your sister. Your sister may seem to live a very free and romantic life, but in fact, your sister is very pitiful. When she dies, she has no real home to say goodbye to. If possible, find a man you like, and who likes you, and cherish the opportunity to appreciate love. Otherwise, when you leave this world, I'm afraid no one will cry for your departure. Woo woo woo. Seeing that Grace was still sobbing and sad, Angela, who was cold by nature, hugged the short girl and stuffed the girl's face into the ravine on her chest. Walk your own way. It's not your turn to worry about the affairs of adults. Chapter 360 Legion Commander and Cavalry General. In mid-February, the army led by Margaret finally arrived at Northenburg. It is worth mentioning that the army was not attacked by the Hedi people during the march. After the soldiers camped outside the castle and exchanged greetings, Margaret quickly organized a military meeting. Alice, tell me about the current situation. Sitting in the first seat, Margaret looked intently at the military map of the Dalmor plain provided by Alice, which was drawn by the military wizard. Alice nodded and said in a deep voice, Shelley Fortress is currently being attacked by the Frost Kingdom and the Hedi people. After several targeted attacks, the Frost Kingdom's army has shown signs of fatigue. The strangest thing is that the Hedi people don't seem to have much desire to attack, and they didn't even participate in the siege. They just cast magic at Shelley Fortress from a distance. There were not many casualties during the entire siege. They just tied down a small number of Vakal Regiment soldiers, which greatly reduced the pressure on the Vakal Regiment. The battle situation is better than expected. What exactly do the Hedi people want to do? Isn't their goal to join forces with the Freljord people to annihilate the defenders of Shelly Fortress? Or do they have another way of attack? Margaret frowned. Did General Vacal find anything unusual? The enemy used the tunnel warfare method to sneak attack Shelly Fortress from underground. General Vacal has seen through their conspiracy and organized personnel to defend. At present, it is difficult for the enemy to capture Shelly Fortress by surprise. In this case, our enemies are too stupid. Isn't it a waste of effort to do so much? Alice nodded and agreed. I think so too. Although it is incredible, judging from the results alone, the Hedi and the Freljord people have no sense of cooperation at all. This must be the main reason why they work, but don't work hard. Perhaps they saw that the Hedi divided their troops to bypass Northenburg and went south to capture Norskaberg. The jealous Freljord people have shown signs of withdrawing their troops after several strong attacks, sweeping across the mountains and rivers. Margaret, with a frown on her face, fixed her eyes on Shelly Fortress. No, it's not that simple. Don't think our enemies are so stupid. Although they are not in harmony, their common goal is to eat up the Vacal war group. They will never do useless work. If the siege is no longer effective, then what can be done to destroy a fortress built on a mountain? The officers attending the meeting were silent. Anyone who has seen the Shelly Fortress will never have any idea of forcibly destroying the fortress. Even after being attacked by catapults and trebuchets for more than 2 months, the walls of the Shelly Fortress have not collapsed. It is simply wishful thinking to want to destroy the entire fortress by conventional means. If it is built on a mountain, can't we just blow up the mountain? Creddy took a sip of honey wine and said casually, blow up the mountain? How likely is it? Margaret and Alice looked at each other. In Margaret's serious eyes, Alice shook her head. Commander, I have also considered this, but I have already heard from the locals that, if you want to blow up Shelly Fortress, you need to raise the entire Martian mountain to the ground, which is impossible even with magic. So, isn't it possible? Gudon gulp. Cled drank 2 more sips of honey wine and burped. The possibility is very small, unless you find the key support point under the mountain. Even the most experienced stonemasons and miners can't do it. After confirming the basic situation of Shelly Fortress, Margaret already had a brief battle plan. The most urgent task is to eliminate the threats outside Shelly Fortress. Alice, I will assign the Dark Blood crossbow guards and shield bow artillery to you. You will be responsible for dealing with the Hedis. Since they have no intention of fighting, we just need to drive them away. After the exit is opened, let General Vacal quickly organize the soldiers of the regiment to withdraw from Shelly Fortress. Don't waste a minute or a second. Remember, we can't give the enemy any chance. The main task is to save people, not to annihilate as many enemies as possible. Understood. After speaking to Alice, Margaret looked at Creddy again. Emerald Cavalry General, you drank so much wine to give yourself courage. Are you afraid of death? The woman made Creddy jump up from the high stool with just one sentence, put down the mead leather pot, and stood on the table. Margaret, you are insulting a great general. If I were afraid of death, I wouldn't be here. A truly great general would not drink at a military meeting, nor would he address his superior by name. We are in a meeting now. Look at what you look like. The woman's voice was as cold and hard as the fortress walls of the Immortal Bastion. Lester was not here, and she was in no mood to indulge this maverick, undisciplined, hairy-faced yodel. She had to eliminate the enemies in Shelly's fortress as soon as possible, so that she could make arrangements as much as possible, and embark on the journey to Ionia. Either throw away your wine jug and sit down, or get out of here. Cled gritted his teeth. His eyes reddened, and he was about to refute something, but he calmed down after seeing Margaret's cold eyes. The yodel threw away the leather wine jug filled with mead, sat back on the table, and avoided the Legion commander's sharp eyes. You are the boss. You know how powerful you are, okay? It's just wine, right? I won't drink it at worst. Margaret spoke a little more slowly, and she didn't continue to hit Cled. Cled, I will give you the command of the new cavalry Dragon Lizard Knights. You are responsible for killing my way through the line of the Frost Kingdom soldiers. Can you do it? What? Commander, you are saying that you want to give me the command of the new Dragon Lizard Cavalry? Kled had known for a long time that there would be a heavy armored cavalry composed of giant dragon lizards in the official Legion of the Emerald Territory this time, but he never thought that he would become the commander of the Dragon Lizard Knights. For a moment, the Yodel boy was a little overwhelmed, and he didn't have any resentment just now. Could it be that he was really going to become a veritable cavalry general? Facing the Yodel people who looked incredulous, Margaret said coldly, "You are the cavalry general appointed by my Emerald Lords. The whole of Naxos recognizes your status. Why can't I give you the command of the Dragon Lizard Cavalry?" Sorry, I'm still a little excited, and lost my composure. Kled, answer me, can you do it? Kled slapped the table, stood up straight, clenched his right fist, placed it across his chest, and roared, "I can. Don't worry, Commander. I will promise not to drink in meetings, and not to have meetings if I drink. If I fail to break through the defense of those bastards, I, Kled, will come to see you with my head. By the way, there's also Scarls. Recently, everyone has given me a lot of monthly tickets, and yesterday a reader in the group gave me soda money. I was so happy that my hands cramped, and I accidentally posted an extra chapter. Chapter 361 Conversation in the Dungeon. In the dark dungeon of Shelley Fortress, Vakal, who hadn't slept for 2 days, brought Roy, who was also dozing, to the bound Freljord. Because of the passive sabotage of the Hedi people, Roy's wooden man plan and the Hedi people's fishing plan hit it off, allowing most of the Black Rose mages to free up time to do other things. The light of the torches in the dungeon could not dispel the bloody smell and darkness that could not be dispelled. Skeletons that had been scraped clean could be seen everywhere, and rotten meat and internal organs were everywhere. However, the people present were too lazy to care about the overly dirty environment. Compared with the golden corpse pit outside the fortress, the dungeon seemed to be a bit beautiful with clear water and birds singing and flowers blooming. "General Vakal, General Roy," he said, "he had important information to report to you, and he spoke Narxan very well." The guard explained, and drew his long sword to guard on the side, making room for Vakal and Roy. With a bloody scar on his face, Vakal took out the last Baroque cigar, rubbed it on the torch to light the cigar, and put it into his mouth. He took a deep puff of the cigar, and the smoke passed through his lungs. Vakal slowly exhaled the smoke, and then looked expressionlessly at the Freljord bearded man who was tied to the stake. The general of the regiment said in a hoarse and low voice, "If you hadn't killed your 3 companions with your own hands, your head would be hanging here now, and your thigh meat would be our food tonight. It's a blessing for you Freljord people. My soldiers haven't had enough food for 3 weeks. Human flesh is really not delicious, but it's better than eating tree bark. Boy, I don't have much patience. I'll only give you 3 sentences. If you dare to waste my time, I'll put the cigarette butt in your eyeball." Carlos shuddered. He felt that the Narxan general in front of him didn't seem to be lying. If he was unlucky, he might have to become the dinner of the same kind today. "You must be General Vakal. My name is Carlos. My father is an Narxan who stayed in Blackiron Castle. I have half Narxan blood in my body. Please give me some time to explain my purpose. I'm here to convey the wishes of Lord Owen, the political officer of the Frost Kingdom. Lord Owen in Falkland has long been dissatisfied with Queen Jelena's tyrannical and absurd rule, so he sent me to convey the news of surrender to Naxos to General Vakal, and to expose Casper's conspiracy." After staring at Carlos coldly for a few seconds, Vakal finally smiled in Carlos's stubborn eyes. He took back the cigarette, but that was about to press on Carlos' eyeballs, allowing Carlos, who was almost out of breath, to breathe again. "Oh. You want to surrender to Naxos? Tell me about it." "Yes, Lord Owen has already contacted 1,000 rebels. When Lord Vakal's soldiers stand under the walls of Caird, we will open the city gates for General Vakal and offer Queen Jelena's head. I believe the Queen's head should be worth a lot of money in Naxos." It sounds good. If the idiots in the Supreme Command could see the old woman's head, they would probably be happy to do the gorilla dance on the conference table. Vakal drew out the Narxan standard longsword and chopped it off the man's head. The sharp edge that had been polished more than a dozen times cut the oil-soaked hemp rope that bound Carlos. After a series of actions, Carlos' scalp was numb and his whole body was weak. He couldn't recover for a long time and collapsed directly to the ground along the pillar. For a moment, He saw the undiminished murderous intent in Vakel's eyes, but it seemed like an illusion and flashed away. Vakel handed over a low stool and forced Carlos to sit on it, saying with a smile, "Don't be so shy. Since you are one of us, I apologize for not treating you well. Carlos, tell me about Casper's conspiracy. I really want to know how he is going to take over Fort Shelley without these rat holes." "Lord Vakel, do you just believe what I say? Aren't you afraid that I'm lying? Believe it or not, I have my own judgment. You say yours, and I'll listen to mine. Carlos, let's talk about business. What kind of arrangements did Casper make?" Carlos took a deep breath and pointed to the ground, not daring to say any more nonsense. "Lord Vakel, Casper never thought of destroying you through conventional attacks. There is a huge natural cavity under Mansion, which is supported by 8 natural giant stone pillars. Shelley Fortress is built on these 8 giant stone pillars. It is unbreakable. Normally, it is like this." Roy's face changed drastically. The man turned his head and was about to say something to Vakel, but he saw that Vakel was still calm and seemed to have expected what Carlos said, so he closed his mouth. Seeing that Vakel didn't respond, Carlos continued, "That's why we can see underground rivers. Normally, you have deployed many mages underground, and any magical fluctuations will expose our intentions. It's impossible to use magic to destroy natural stone pillars. However, ice warlocks can break the rules of magic. You would never have thought that ice warlocks, who use true ice, can silently erode natural rock through their talents, turning it into pseudo-true ice. That is, turning it into an ice body as hard as fine steel. Once it leaves true ice and the ice warlock's innate magic, the ice crystallized rock will instantly break, turning the hard rock into fragile ice sand. Currently, 6 of the 8 stone pillars supporting Shelley Fortress have completed most of the pseudo-true ice. The ice warlocks are working hard to increase the degree of pseudo-true ice of the last 2 stone pillars, which will be completed within a week. In fact, if we start now, Shelley Fortress will not be able to continue to exist. To be honest, Lord Owen doesn't know what Casper is thinking." Carlos had expected to see some panic expression on the face of the arrogant General Vakel, but he heard a disdainful question. "That's all? I'm a little disappointed. It seems that Lord Owen made the right choice. Following that stupid and old woman Yelena is simply courting death." Did General Vakel think of this a long time ago? "Almost. Although I don't know that you can turn the entire Shelley Fortress into ruins, I know that you will definitely make a fuss about Shelley Fortress. So, does General Vakel have any countermeasures?" "There are no countermeasures. It's similar to General Casper's idea." Vakel smiled faintly, but there was unspeakable madness in Carlos' eyes. "I just relied on the Lord Mage of the Black Rose to place dozens of magic bombs on the 2 hills. The power is just enough to flatten the hills and let some extra rocks roll to the outside of the mountains. If we have to die, we will die together. We can have a companion on the road, right?" Chapter 362 Dragon, Cat, Dog. On the top of the Goral Mountains, Lester stood on the peak, where the snow was flying, squinting at the dozens of Hedis wearing white robes like ants below the mountain. The original plan to reunite with Margaret was temporarily interrupted, and the dragon bird finally landed on the top of the mountain. The sneaky Hedis on the Goral Mountain successfully aroused the man's interest. Even if they returned to the Legion of the Emerald Territory, their power would be limited by the sheep spirits, and they would not play a big role on the battlefield. It would be better to solve the problems brought by the Hedis. Zaya, who turned into a tall human form, squatted on the snow. The dragon girl curiously gathered snowballs with her hands clumsily and looked at Lester with curved eyebrows from time to time, as if she wanted to make a Lester brand snowman. When she was still in dragon form, she envied her spouse for being able to build a snowman with another human female. At this moment, she achieved her long cherished wish. She finally didn't have to look down at her spouse and another human female hugging each other in the cold sky and moan. She also wanted to build a snowman. With Margaret's ability, it is definitely not a problem to save Vakel. Even if she encounters danger, she has enough magic items to save her life. Although the magic items collected by Night's Edge over the years are not many, they are enough. On the contrary, the behavior of the Hedi people is very abnormal. They seem to be looking for something. Lester, who had been observing for a while, watched a dozen Heedy people happily rushing into an invisible valley. Lester was more certain of his guess. He had already sent Evelyn, who was always slacking off. When Evelyn came back, he would know what these Heedy people were doing secretly. Lecht, this is you, is it okay? The man turned around and found that there was an evil thing that looked like a talking orange under Zaya's feet. If he guessed correctly, it should be the head that Zaya pinched for him. If this were me, where would Zaya be? Zaya has always been here. The dragon girl happily picked up the hideous looking orange snowball and placed it on her head. A gust of wind blew, and the snow on the snowball fell on the girl's dark green hair, causing the girl to squint her eyes involuntarily and said coquettishly, Zaya will always be with Lecht. Wherever Lecht wants to go, Zaya will take him there, never separate forever. Okay. With a startled look, Lester smiled and held the evil snowball on Zaya's head in his arms, brushing off the snowflakes on the girl's head. Okay, but Zaya gave me a gift, so I have to give Zaya one too. As he spoke, Lester began to cast magic, and the evil orange in his hand began to change shape in the ice blue magic, and finally turned into human forms of little Lester and little Zaya hugging and dancing. From the perspective of the previous life, the handmaid made of blue ice is probably enough to be called an art level ice sculpture. Handing the unmelting ice sculpture to the dragon girl, who was exclaiming and shining in her eyes, Lester couldn't help but recall the first time he made an ice drill with magic. He still clearly remembered that, in order to prevent the two angels from being jealous of each other, he gave the ice drill to Meredith. After so many years, the ordinary ice drill should have melted away. From a simple ice drill to a lifelike human ice sculpture, the growth of strength in more than 20 years is definitely not something that can be reflected in a few words. Meredith, who has been away for a while, must have a clear direction in life. Master, will you also give a small gift to your most loyal servant Evelyn? Evelyn came out from the shadow behind the man, hugged Lester's back, and looked at Zaya with a little jealousy in her eyes. Greedy ghost, I think you want to eat human soul pyroxene again. Grabbing Evelyn's neck, Lester held Evelyn, who had turned into a shadow cat, in his arms. I can't hide it from the master. I wonder if the master can make those guys under the mountain into soul pyroxene and give it to me. Evelyn stretched and looked at Lester pitifully, but was ruthlessly rejected by Lester. Although I also want to do this, I have promised a certain lamb that I will not use my ability to kill people and take souls. Woo 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 master, don't want Evelyn. Evelyn is so pitiful. Ivney, who deceived Lechter, is bad. Instinct told Zaya that the ominous thing in her spouse's arms was emitting the smell of lies, and Zaya stared and puffed up her face. La la la, little silly dragon cat Furin was not to be outdone, and made faces at the dissatisfied dragon girl, making Zaya's face red. Until now, the dragon girl has not learned how to curse. Okay Evelyn, stop bullying Zaya, tell me what you heard. Shaking her tail proudly at the helpless dragon girl, Evelyn began to narrate the information she heard in the shadow area. Master, these Hedis are looking for the ancient ruins left by the Atlands. According to them, the ancient ruins are somewhere in the Goral Mountains. Looking for ancient ruins. In this way, the Hedis' intention to occupy Norska Castle is very clear. They need a base to contain the Narxan army and secretly transport what they have obtained from the ruins. The ruins of the Atlands. If I remember correctly, the attributeless energy magic cast by the Hedis is one of the legacies left by the Atlands in the ruins. It seems that the ruins of the Atlands have a huge attraction for the Hedis. His eyes swept across Evelyn and the face of Zaya, who was pouting in dissatisfaction, and Lester's face became a little more strange. Evelyn, help me take care of Zaya here. I'll go down and take a look. I want to go with you, master, and I don't want to stay with the stupid dragon. Ugh. Zaya made a vicious expression to the cat who slandered her. The cat was about to fight back, but was stopped by Lester's words. Whoever is more obedient can be the elder sister. Zaya, do you want to be Evelyn's elder sister? Yes. Yes. The dragon girl nodded seriously, causing the wide-eyed cat Furin to raise her trembling cat paws in disbelief. Help me keep an eye on this disobedient cat. Zaya, you will be the elder sister in the future. Master, I don't want this stupid dragon to be my elder sister. Lester laughed as he was carried and thrown into Zaya's arms. It's not up to you. Zaya, if Evelyn leaves your sight, tell me when I come back. Evelyn will be your younger sister in the future. Evelyn, if you don't want to be an elder sister, you must be obedient. Meow. In addition to the stupid dragon, there is also a cat and a dog here. I won't tell who it is. Who is the stupid dragon? Chapter 363 Under the Mountains. Above the Goral Mountains. The dark and deep cave is located on the side of an inconspicuous col, blocked by two protruding hills, and blocked by trees. The underground space hidden under the tree hole has not seen the sun for 1,000 years. If someone can look down at the Goral Mountains from a high altitude through the messy plants that block the view, they will find that there is an unnatural concave terrain in the center of the towering Goral Mountains. From the overall point of view, this col is like a meteorite that fell from the sky, and it is incompatible with the gentle ridgeline. As if to cover up this discordant scar, the green plants in the col are very lush, comparable to some rainforests in the southern continent. This also means that, if someone deliberately looks for it, it is easy to find this special place. Stepping into the dead tree hole, Mosley walked in the center of the team with a torch, his eyes fixed on the glowing half of the broken crystal on his left hand, and the joy in his heart could no longer be suppressed. The broken crystal was excavated from the ruins of Atlan to the northwest of the Pagras tree peaks. In the murals of the ruins, it has been confirmed by the Hedi people as the main power source of the energy tower, and it has a magic sensing function within a certain distance. The energy crystal has a very clear reaction, everyone. This is the crypt leading to the ruins of Atlan. There is absolutely no mistake. There must be the same energy crystal under it. After a small cheer, Mosley quickly sent two agile soldiers to Norska Castle to deliver the message and seek support from the troops stationed in the castle. He organized people to disguise the entrance and exit of the tree hole again, and left 4 clever soldiers to guard the entrance to the cave to avoid being blocked by others. He directly led the remaining 20 or so people into the crypt. The deerskin boots splashed a lot of mud spots on the wet mud, and the hem of the white cotton robe was also stained, but no one cared about these. Everyone just kept speeding up. Sure enough, more than 10 minutes later, the Hedi people who continued to go deep underground found a giant stone with a material completely different from the surrounding rock wall. Under the mottled black and grey stones, there is dark red or powder, which is incompatible with the green rock wall. Judging from the stones blocking the road, it seems that someone has deliberately placed them here to block the road. Quincy, be careful. Mosley observed the big stone blocking the road, turned around and patted the pale old man, and warned. Don't make the opening too big, so as not to collapse the cave. Don't worry, Boss Mosley, let alone anything else. I will never make any mistakes when digging stones. I have been digging for a lifetime, and I won't dig it down even with my eyes closed. Quincy, who was wearing an old miner's leather hat on his head, rubbed his hands, and pressed his hands on the black and grey stone wall. White magic halos emerged from his hands, and the rock wall began to vibrate continuously in the rhythm of magic. The hard stone fell off like collapsing gravel in the vibration. Quincy laughed proudly. I never thought that I, an old man, would one day witness the ruins of Atlanta in person. This life is not in vain. I have actually done something as great as the city lord. Be proud, old Quincy. A young Hedi mage laughed. Not only will we witness the ruins, but under the leadership of the city lord, we will use the power of Atlanta to conquer the entire Valoran continent. Even the gods are no match for the Atlanta magic energy tower. We will become the most powerful country on the Valoran continent, and Naxos and that damned Demacia will all surrender to us. That's right, as long as we can get the processed drawings of the energy tower, we can conquer the world. Okay, you guys, don't delay Quincy's work. No delay, no delay. After a laugh and a scolding, Mosley said with emotion. It is said that every once in a while, a continental power that can conquer the world will appear. The last time was the warlord Uzel who rose from the Damo plain. He established a dark empire that conquered most of the Valoran continent, but unfortunately it only lasted for a few hundred years before it disappeared. I heard that during that period, Hedi City was completely closed. When we came out of the Northern Ice Sea again, the owner of the Immortal Fortress had been replaced by the Naxans. Quincy's movements were very fast. The 2-meter thick hard stone in his hand was cut casually like a piece of cake. Who who at the moment the stone was broken through, a cold and dry wind blew in from the gap, making old Quincy shiver. In a trance, he seemed to hear the sad cry of a woman. When he calmed down and listened again, he could not hear anything. The cave was dead silent. Suspecting that it was his own illusion, in order to avoid being laughed at by the younger generation for being timid, old Quincy did not explain the abnormality just now to others, but secretly raised a few vigilance in his heart. Quincy dug a small hole in the stone that blocked the road so that two people could walk side by side. Mosley sent one person to enter first, and after confirming that there was no danger, he followed in. Under the light of the torch, the environment behind the stone did not change much. At the end of the light was complete darkness, and the terrain was gradually going down. The atmosphere began to become a little depressing. Seeing that no one else was willing to talk, old Quincy, who was walking in the front half of the team, tried to break the somewhat depressing atmosphere. Don't look at it as it's dark here and there's nothing. In fact, we are already deep underground. Do you hear the whirring sound? The air here is circulating. In addition to the place where we came in, there may be vents leading to the outside world in other places. Okay, I'm Quincy, who can do everything. Don't show off your profound knowledge. Now the most urgent thing is to find the ruins quickly. Then you will have a chance to show your skills. Mosley said without turning his head. The crowd laughed a few times. Quincy smiled awkwardly and didn't continue talking. After walking for about half an hour, the natural rock wall finally turned into artificial indigo blue square bricks. Various mica and clustered crystals grew in the broken places, reflecting dazzling colors under the light of the torch. This is the indigo mixed brick that the Atlan people like most. It will not rot for 100 years or 1,000 years. I don't know what materials the Atlan people added to the mixed bricks. Such a turn has the characteristic of absorbing mana fluctuations. Although there are not many, it can also play a role in isolating and exploring. Picking up the finger-sized indigo broken stones, as a Hidi who has excavated the ruins of Atlan once, Mosley knows that any technology of the Atlan people is of inestimable value. If we can obtain the manufacturing process of mixed bricks, our architecture can be greatly developed. I really don't know how such a powerful nation disappeared in history. Everyone, be careful when you enter the ruins later. There are some dangerous mechanisms in the ruins that need to be cracked. Chapter 364 Bone Cemetery, Night Golem. The scarlet tip of the knife easily pierced through the robe, pierced through the heart, and brought out a handful of blood. Lester, who no longer needed to hide his whereabouts, pulled out the moon rose expressionlessly and put it back into the scabbard after the blood vibrated. Everything was going on quietly, and the two Hidi people who wanted to run out to deliver the message, and the 4 Hidi soldiers who were ambushing at the entrance of the cave also breathed their last. The ice wall strengthened by runes sealed the tree hole, and Lester directly cut off the retreat of the Hidi people. At the moment the corpse fell, the Hidi's body was frozen into a piece of broken blood-colored ice crystal. Standing in the blood ice, Lester seemed to hear the sound of the soul leaving. Whether it was the red rune or the dark seal ring on his hand, they all expressed their desire for the soul that was about to leave the material world. The man hesitated for a moment, but still let the soul leave and return to the underworld. You can't harvest souls at will. You can't use extraordinary power to slaughter lives. Lester didn't expect that he would be interviewed by Kindred, who represented the Mother of Masks. According to the original world background, the Protoss and the Darkin killed quite a few people, and the Mother of Masks didn't issue any warnings, saying that the foreign population would affect the world balance of Runeland. In fact, it was just bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Lester understood this, but there was no need to turn against him now, and the lamb spirits were still useful, so Lester was willing to restrain himself. Instead of picking up the torch leaning against the wall, Lester chose to change his form into a half-orc state. With the addition of wild magic, Lester could see things without any obstacles even in the dark. The ruins of the Atlans. I'm looking forward to what surprises you can bring me. Unconsciously, no one spoke anymore. Da-da-da-da-da-da. The chaotic footsteps in the darkness were as silent as the quartz clock in front of a withered tomb, guiding the ignorant to walk into the tomb with curiosity, walk into their own coffins peacefully, and let death close the coffin lid. It was not until a layer of crystal white sand began to appear under their feet, so that everyone no longer made messy footsteps that disturbed their rest, that everyone's tense nerves relaxed a little. The white sand became thicker and thicker, and the temperature became lower and lower. Broken black stone statues were randomly distributed everywhere. Hideous helmets and stone armor could be seen everywhere. Broken weapons were inserted on the scarred floor tiles, and the unbroken bones on the ground were piled up in a number that made people's scalps numb. When their eyes stayed on the half-broken skull, everyone finally realized that the white sand covering their calves under their feet was not something else, but human bone powder. They were stepping on a bone cemetery, and the white powder under their feet was not sand at all. A chill ran up from the soles of the feet, reaching the tops of everyone's heads, and even their breathing became heavier. The most talkative chatterbox was also shocked by the unimaginable horror scene and was speechless. The scene reflected by the fire seemed to have spanned 1,000 years, bringing everyone back to a heavy time period. A tragic war had taken place here, and all life had come to a rest in the darkness, until 1,000 years later, new sacrifices stepped into the cemetery. How many people died here? Is this really a relic that inherits advanced technology? Walking in the gradually widening stone road, the bone powder under his feet became lighter again due to spreading. Mosley, with a stern face, carefully explored and observed the ruins. Everything in front of him was completely different from what he imagined. The last Atlan ruins excavated in Hedi City. He felt the greatness and friendliness of the Atlan civilization, the amazing mechanical transmission power energy mechanism and the magnificent and solid building structure, which made it difficult for people to have any thoughts of comparison. But this time, he only felt the desperate darkness and dead silence. It was as if all the Atlans died here. He could only see disturbing fear here. If this was true, then who killed the Atlans and destroyed such a great civilization? Unknowingly, he reached the end of the passage, and a black stone knight appeared in front of him. The overall style of the stone knight tended to be dark. He was wearing heavy full body plate armor, leg armor, hand armor and throat guard. The helmet was a grotesque fence style closed helmet. The eyes were hidden behind narrow holes, like two bottomless black abysses. The knight knelt on one knee, holding a 2-meter long wide metal blunt sword in both hands. The armor was engraved with Atlan's favorite willow herb flower pattern. He knelt quietly on the ground, watching the darkness and tranquility of 1,000 years. M.O. Lord Mosley, what is this? Unable to hold back the uneasiness in his heart any longer, a soldier asked Mosley in a panic. Before Mosley could explain that he had never seen this thing, after a magical fluctuation of hum, the eyes of the stone knight in the dark glowed with an ominous red light. Amid the terrible sound of stone collision, the knight slowly stood up and raised the uncorrupted metal blunt sword in his hand towards the Hedi. The blunt sword weighing 100 pounds cut through the air and ruthlessly slashed at the invader, as if to vent all the darkness of 1,000 years. The attacked Hedi soldier rolled over to avoid the knight's attack range, but the knight turned his wrist and changed the downward sword force to a diagonal slash at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye. The heavy sword slashed at the waist of the Hedi, who rolled halfway, splitting the soldier directly in two. The stone bricks were shattered by the heavy sword, splashing a piece of broken flesh and blood. In just a moment, a fresh life was directly wiped out. The stone sculpture that killed the first person slowly raised the heavy metal blunt sword, turned its somewhat stiff head, and faced the next invader closest to it. At the moment, when the first knight's statue began to move under the effect of magic, the other 4 knights in the darkness also broke the shackles of 1,000 years, and began to shoulder the responsibilities arranged by the creator at the beginning of their birth. More heavy footsteps came from deeper. Under the command of Mosley, everyone madly released energy magic to the knight, who began to move again. The magic emitting white light hit the body of the stone sculpture, causing the stone sculpture to stop moving for a few seconds. The other 4 knight golems quickly approached the crowd, repeatedly confirmed the crystal fragments in their hands, and Mosley suddenly shouted loudly, "Attack their eyes! Their eyes are the energy crystals that drive the golems." The soldiers who heard the reminder spontaneously divided into 2 groups. One group used magic to hinder the action of the golem knight, and the other group used magic to accurately attack the eyes of the stone statue. The magic impact, after shattering the helmet, successfully caused a gap in the 2 energy crystal eyes. The first Golem Knight finally stopped moving and returned to the static form of the stone statue with a big sword in his hand. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365, An Unpleasant Meeting. After paying the price of 4 lives again, Mosley finally solved the Night Golem, turning the 5 terrifying golems into solemn and majestic sculptures again. In addition to the 2 sword knights holding great swords, the other 4 Night Golems also had 2 bow Night Golems. Unlike the sword Night Golems, the magic crossbows in the hands of the bow Night Golems caused great damage to the Hidi people present by surprise. After a fierce battle, the exploration team had to stop after 5 people were killed. With most of the magic consumed, they began to think about the possibility of continuing to explore in depth. Lord Mosley, how could such a terrifying thing appear in the ruins? Were there war machines like golems in the ruins before? The person who spoke was wearing a half-length leathering armor and holding a 2-handed long-handed crane-beak steel warhammer. His name was Alkut. As one of the most warlike and capable young soldiers in the Hidi Legion, Alkut was born with excellent magic talent. He was personally selected by Hidi Marshal Guga and placed under the command of faction officer Mosley for training. From the very beginning of his contact with non-attribute energy magic, Alkut could easily control and shape his attack methods. When most people could only release simple energy arrows and energy balls according to the mana running path, Alkut could already use energy magic nets to restrain and imprison enemies, or cast advanced magic such as defensive energy barriers to gain combat advantages. As the most powerful warrior under Mosley, Alkut has a unique and special status. Standing in front of the statue of a knight holding a metal sword, stroking the knight's cold stone shell, Alkut's hair stood on end. He always had a special premonition that the knight's sword would chop down in the next second. It has obviously lost its energy node, but still brings him such a strong sense of threat. The magic craftsmanship contained in the golem is absolutely extraordinary. Please look here. After experiencing our magic bombardment, the golem's body has suffered minimal damage. Ladies and gentlemen, this means that energy magic cannot cause effective damage to the golem at all. I'm very sure that the reason why the golems fell into a brief state of stagnation is because they are absorbing the magic energy we released. If Lord Mosley had not seen through that one of the golem's energy nodes is in the eye, I'm afraid we would all die under the attack of these war golems. Facing these golems that are immune to most magical attacks, the swords in our hands are more useful than magic, provided that our magic can break the helmets of these golems and expose their energy crystals. Nodding, Mosley continued with what Alkut said. Alkut is right. These golems are indeed very powerful. In fact, this is the first time I have seen such a thing appear in the ruins of the Atlants. The Atlantians must have created such a guardian golem to deal with more powerful enemies. This also means that the secret of this relic is definitely much greater than imagined. There is probably a golem manufacturing process. Correspondingly, the danger here is beyond our ability to deal with. I think we should retreat first and wait for the arrival of reinforcement from Norska Castle before making adequate preparations for in-depth exploration. I agree with Lord Mosley. This place is too dangerous. Without leaking information, we have plenty of time to gather people. There is no need to take huge risks to move forward. If there are such golems, I'm afraid we will suffer casualties. Such sacrifices are worthless. Everyone echoed Mosley's words, obviously frightened by the terrible golems in the ruins. Then retreat now, and wait until the reinforcement from Norska Castle arrive. Having made the decision to retreat, the exploration team, which had been reduced to 16 people, began to move towards the entrance. However, to their surprise, the retreat was completely blocked by a dark blue ice wall. A strange face with strange animal ears was leaning against the ice wall, holding a long knife in his right hand that looked very extraordinary. Sorry, everyone, no one can leave now. Mosley raised his right hand and stopped the soldiers who wanted to attack. Did you kill all our people outside? The orc smiled slightly, and his overly handsome face made the hearts of several weak-minded Hidi soldiers beat faster. Yes, including the 2 messengers you sent to Norska Castle. They are all dead. Norska Castle will not know that you have found this place or died here. Who are you? We have no grudges. Isn't it a bit impolite for you to do this? Mosley stared at the somewhat familiar and somewhat unfamiliar face, frowning. He didn't remember when he provoked a Vastaya. And how could the Vastaya, who have always lived in another continent, come all the way to Valoran and deliberately find him? If there is no grudge, Mosley would never believe that this would happen to him. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that I'm an Arxan, and the Hedis are fighting with the Narxans. This is why I'm blocking the road here. By the way, I'm also very interested in what you found. This is also the only reason why you can still breathe. The disdainful tone of the Vastaya successfully angered the Hedis. Mosley put his hands behind his back, gestured to the soldiers behind him, and said coldly, "No matter who you are, boy, if you step back now, maybe you can still see the sun tomorrow. Listen, beastman from Ionia, don't be ungrateful, otherwise I will cut open your chest, dig out your heart and stuff it into your cavity. Then let my soldiers vent their anger on your soon-to-be chilled corpse." Obviously you misunderstood something. Before he finished speaking, 15 Hedi soldiers began to cast spells to attack the Vastaya. Alka directly released a magic barrier and attached a magic attack to his warhammer. Go to hell, you bastard. The huge energy ball released by the warhammer's hammer arrived before the rest of the energy attacks and flew towards the Vastaya together. Look, they were the ones who started it. I was just protecting myself. In Mosley's sight, the Vastaya suddenly turned his head and began to speak to the air, and then the magic attack was eliminated by inexplicable spell fluctuations, just as the name suggests. Along with Alkat's powerful energy attack, more than a dozen balls of energy magic dissipated out of thin air like bubbles that had been punctured. Chapter 366 The Landslide and Mountain Destruction Disaster. The incomprehensible scene made a cold sweat appear on Mosley's forehead, while the Vastaya was still talking to the air in a weird way. If I take action next, it won't be considered a foul. My little sheep. What's more terrifying is that Mosley actually heard a faint humming that seemed like an illusion, as if it came from the underworld. Yeah. After confirming that there was indeed no one in the direction he was looking at, Mosley rubbed his eyes and looked at the Vastaya with an indifferent expression again. Who are you talking to? A chill that froze his heart came from behind him. Mosley turned around and saw a human-shaped ice sculpture holding a warhammer high with an unbelievable look on his face. Kurt. No one answered, and the other Hedis were also stunned on the spot, shocked to the point of being unable to say a word. The strongest in the team quietly became a human-shaped popsicle, and they didn't even know how the enemy made the move. As they walked forward, including Mosley, fear controlled their bodies to make way for the newcomers. This was an absolute suppression at the level of life, just like a sheep seeing an ancient saber-toothed tiger. Before arriving at the ice sculpture, Lester patted the Hedi warrior who had just scolded him, and there was no emotion in his voice. Who do you think you are talking to? The crackling sound of ice cracking became louder and louder, and the ice sculpture shattered into a pile of red ice crystals. Suppressing the warnings and fear coming from all parts of his body, Mosley stared at the Vastaya who was at least at the level of Magic Master, and whispered, "What do you want? It's very simple, either die here, or sleep here with this young man, who likes to scold people." Raising his right hand, Lester patted Mosley's shoulder as Mosley's smile was uglier than crying. "Either you accompany me to visit this Atlan ruins, or I will never kill you, if you are still alive. So what is your choice?" "I'm afraid we have no choice. We only ask you to keep your word and show mercy. The situation is stronger than the person," and Mosley chose to surrender. Rain fell from the dark sky, and the mist covered the whole world. Gray became the only main color of Shelley Fortress. The few remaining birds and beasts fled madly into the distance, as if they had smelled the irresistible death coming. Caspar, the general of the Frost Kingdom, the favorite wife of Queen Yelena, and the surviving descendant of the Stuttgara, stood outside the mountain and gave the final order expressionlessly. The immortal fortress, which the Stuttgara people were once most proud of, was about to be buried in the hands of the descendants of the Stuttgara people, with blood hatred for their enemies. 100 meters underground in Shelly Fortress, the Ice Warlock Gilina and the other 8 Ice Warlocks simultaneously retracted their frost magic. The stone pillars that had turned into pseudo-ice lost the blessing of ice and frost magic, and turned into ordinary ice crystals. Unable to bear the weight of a fortress any longer, the ice pillars began to crack with a crisp sound. As the cracks grew larger, the first ice pillar collapsed, and Shelly Fortress began to shake. Gilina and other ice warlocks had already left. The 8 stone pillars that had been transformed by the Stugilla people broke one by one, and the ground collapsed, and the mountains were destroyed. The whole land was shaking. The world seemed to be silent for a moment. At the moment, when the next time node arrived, the earth cracked, the mountains collapsed, and the sky cracked into an abyss. Magic kicked off the destruction of nature in its own way. Boom. Boom. The Shelly Fortress, which had been weathered and stood for 100 years, finally bent its unyielding waist and fell into the mountains. The 2 peaks that had already begun to shake were shattered into countless huge stones by the impact of another magical force, which spread all over the sky like a volcanic eruption. The dust and fog that resisted the drizzle covered the area of 100 miles. The rolling huge stones were like exploding shells, exterminating all living things. Immersed in the joy of revenge, Casper did not expect the effect to be so good. Even the mountains were broken into countless pieces. No one can survive such a natural wrath. Whether it is the Narxans in the Shelly Fortress or the Hedis on the other side, they will pay the price in blood. Woo woo woo. The joy of achieving the goal did not last long. The heavy horn of Narxus broke through the rain curtain and brought the iron hoof of war. Casper had to look further away. A terrifying army was moving towards him, faster and faster, until Martian was completely flattened. The soul-shaking sound of destruction gradually faded, allowing Casper to hear the heavy footsteps coming from the enemy camp. Master Mage Gilina, I think you should understand my combat intentions. This great battle is left to you. Gilina, who had long observed the battlefield, frowned. She knew that, no matter how this battle was fought, the winner would be the Narxans. Rather than arranging troops, it would be better to talk about how to bring more Frost Kingdom soldiers back to Falkland alive. Fortunately, she had expected this, and was well prepared. Target scared. Retreat. What? Wouldn't retreating lead to a great rout? Mage Gilina, I won't. Casper, listen to me. Don't keep acting crazy in front of me. Don't overestimate the patience of an Iceborne warlock, and stay here, if you keep talking nonsense. Facing Gilina's warning, Casper shrugged. Okay, you have the final say. Dragon Lizard Knights, listen up. Follow me to kill the enemy. On the Damoplean, Kled rode the timid scare and led 300 Dragon Lizard Knights, followed by 2,000 cavalrymen, out of the army formation. At a distance of 1,000 meters from the Frost Kingdom soldiers, the light cavalry directly divided into 2 teams to encircle the left and right sides. The cavalry drew their bows and arrows on the saddles and shot arrows at the fleeing soldiers, just like the weak shotgun attacks of an old man. Under a round of arrow rain, only dozens of the slowest running Frost Kingdom soldiers were killed and injured. Even the fine iron double-sided stirrups made in the war workshop could not save a group of rookie riders who had never worn their pants for a few days. Margaret frowned after looking at the results of the cavalry team through the telescope. The only weakness of the Emerald Territory is that there is no suitable large-scale racecourse and nomads who have been in contact with horses since childhood. For the Narxans, instead of spurring on the horseback and whipping the horse, they would rather carry a 2-meter-long mace and run a few steps to smash people's heads. This is determined by the hilly terrain of Narxus. In the past, most of the wars were wars between infantry. Although there are enough war horses now, there is no way to directly change this. Chapter 367 Frost Magic Trap. Woo-woo-woo. Woo-woo-woo. Looking at the giant lizard approaching him, Woo's heart was filled with fear. He turned his head and said a few words to the human not far away and was about to run away like other humans. However, his right foot froze, causing the troll to fall straight to the ground without balance. Woohoo! You have no say in this. Seeing the troll warriors start to lose control, the ice warlock bit his fingertips and ripped blood into the enslavement array he had just cast. As the ice warlock's face became paler and paler, the frost magic wrapped around the trolls' bodies. The irritable trolls howled in pain and rolled on the ground. Woo-hoo-hoo. The heart-wrenching pain came from inside the body. After more than 10 seconds, the troll's souls were completely enslaved by the warlock's black magic. The ice blue pupils lost their original luster, and the brain, which was not very smart to begin with, lost its last ability to think. If you look closely, you will find that the trolls are absorbing the ice element in the air at an abnormal speed. Under the control of the ice warlock, the 25 trolls who had lost their self-consciousness stopped running or struggling, picked up their weapons, and turned around to rush towards the oncoming dragon lizard cavalry. Lord Casper, what should we do? Should we run away? Vanna, who was riding on a horse, looked back at the battlefield that was beginning to collapse, and turned to look at Casper. If we fight back, we might still have a chance to defeat the Noxans. It would be foolish to leave our backs to the Noxans at the cost of sacrificing the troll army. Those Noxans will soon be able to annihilate the trolls and catch up with us. By then, I'm afraid that few of the more than 10,000 soldiers will survive. We have to run away, but not now. I know Galena, and I know the group of ice warlocks even better. They are a group of ruthless wizards. None of the women who can survive on the frail-jawed icefield is a simple character. She must have her own ideas for making such arrangements. Follow Galena closely. With the identity that Jelena gave me, she will never treat me as a sacrifice no matter what. A round of arrows was fired from a mechanical crossbow. The steel crossbow arrows pierced into the dark blue fat of the trolls, but did not cause effective damage. As the distance between the two sides became shorter and shorter, the Emerald Dragon Lizard Knight, who was already pressing forward, soon collided head-on with the big guy under the counter-attack of the troll. Facing the more than 3-meter long mace in the troll's hand, although a little uneasy, the Dragon Lizard Knight carefully selected from the legion did not intend to dodge, but silently set up the fine iron cavalry lance, lowered his body, and pressed against the back of the dragon lizard. The sound of flesh being pierced was endless. The trolls relied on their instincts to smash 7 or 8 dragon lizard knights with maces, and then they were disemboweled by the lances. 300 dragon lizard knights whistled past one after another, and the arrogant trolls were directly crushed into a pile of meat paste. Scare, who fled the battlefield, saw the terrible troll being torn apart easily, so he carried the cursing Kled and prepared to return to the dragon lizard knights charging team again. However, just halfway through the run, the dead body of the troll swelled to the extreme and was frozen into an icicle by the unrestrained ice element, emitting bursts of white mist in the rain. As if they had noticed something wrong with the surrounding environment, the dragon lizard's charge formation began to become somewhat chaotic. However, before they could escape, a series of terrible cold waves roared and spread. The dead trolls' bodies became containers for violent ice element. Before the dragon lizard knights in the middle of the formation could react and could no longer carry more ice element, the icicles formed by the trolls' bodies exploded directly. The dozens of dragon lizard knights closest to the exploding icicles were directly frozen into ice sculptures by the terrible cold air. Ice spikes like blooming ice flowers rose from the ground and pierced the dragon lizard's softest abdomen, turning the dragon lizards and the knights on their backs into candied whores. Because of the rain, the abundant water element became an inexhaustible source of power for frost magic. In just a few seconds, the dragon lizard knights suffered heavy casualties. Seeing his premonition come true, Scare was so scared that he stopped and stood up, all the dragon scales on his body. Gurgle, gurgle. Scarl tried to persuade Kled to stay away from the terrible enemy, but was kicked hard in the abdomen by Kled. The kick just hit Scarl's dragon scales, and Kled grimaced in pain. You hopeless coward. I really want to chop off your little head to see if it's full of cowardly little mice. It hurts so much, I grew a body of scales for nothing. An anxious Kled could only watch his dragon lizard knights being ambushed by the mutated trolls, and he was unable to join the battlefield because of the cowardly Scarl. The furious Kled jumped off Scarl's body, picked up his axe, and rushed to the location of the frost trap. Gurgle, gurgle. Woo-woo. The aggrieved Scarl anxiously circled in place, looking at the back that was getting farther and farther away from him. After all, his worry about his companions overcame his fear. The dragon lizard hissed and rushed towards Kled. Good girl. I knew you were good. Kled jumped from the spot and landed perfectly on Scarl's back. After being praised by Kled, the dragon lizard moved faster, sticking out his long tongue, as if he had really become a fearless warrior. When Skarl, who finally mustered up the courage, carried Kled into the icy field, formed by the corpses of the trolls, Margaret, riding a warhorse, also led the army to the periphery of the battlefield. Frowning, Margaret was extremely dissatisfied with the result, that most of the newly formed dragon lizard knights were killed or injured, and was the Yodel who was abandoned by his mount here, to make fun of him? Although she had heard that Kled's dragon lizard Skarl was very timid, it was the first time Margaret had seen him so timid. After all, after Kled joined the Emerald Territory, he went directly to the Immortal Bastion under the arrangement of the Lord of the Emerald Territory, and became the foreign aide of the Emerald Territory. Margaret had only heard about how Kled fought specifically. Alice, these Freljord warlocks had such powerful magic? Aren't there any restrictions? Chapter 368 How to Stop the Pursuit. Alice, who was accompanying Margaret, knew that Margaret was not in a good mood, so she lowered her voice. Master, the Iceborne warlocks are different from ordinary mages. They have an independent inheritance system. I have never seen such terrible magic traps in previous battles. Now the troll army of the Frost Kingdom has been annihilated. Such magic traps can only be released by trolls. From this point of view, such means should not be used frequently. Nodding without comment, Margaret looked at the female mage in a black dress on her right. Meredith, as a mage of the Black Rose, what do you think? Many years have passed, and Meredith's appearance has not changed much. After putting on light makeup, she has become more feminine, covering up her square face with some flaws. It is completely different from the previous style of wearing mage robes. After returning to the Emerald Territory, the female mage began to ask Trioli some things that women should learn. Unfortunately, the man that the female mage wanted to show her learning results the most never returned to the Emerald Territory. Master Legionnaire, if I'm not mistaken, those ice warlocks should have used the bodies of the trolls as magic containers and forcibly engraved offensive magic circles in the trolls' bodies. At the cost of the trolls' deaths, they turned the trolls, who were born with a certain affinity for ice element, into magic bombs. Even from the perspective of the Black Rose, this kind of magic trap that can use living creatures as a means of attack is very rare. Regardless of whether it is vicious or not, this kind of magic attack can cause damage to the enemy unexpectedly. Although the means are powerful, such magic is not without limitations. In order to cast such magic, the caster must have a certain degree of elemental affinity and cannot have too strong a will to resist. I don't think there are too many such casting materials in Freljord. Is there any way to detect this kind of magic trap in advance? Meredith said softly, nodding to Margaret. If you use the Eye of Reconnaissance, you can see that the troll's body is madly absorbing the magic element in the air. As long as there is a wizard accompanying the army, this method will not work again. The terrible dragon lizard knight was severely injured by the troll, but the light cavalry archer was like a dead plaster stuck behind him, and couldn't be shaken off. Arrows continued to devour lives, and the Emerald Army was getting closer and closer. Many soldiers of the Frost Kingdom had dropped their weapons, and raised their hands, hoping that they could save their lives. Riding on horseback, Galina turned her head to look at the corrupt battle situation, and her eyes glanced at Caspar, who was more than 10 meters behind her, with a slight smile on her lips. Oh, you are smart enough. After Scare carried the tyrannical Kled, and led the dragon lizard knight back to the battlefield again, the retreat of the Frost Kingdom soldiers finally turned into a great rout. The soldiers who were caught up raised their hands one after another, but were directly crushed by the dragon lizard knights led by Kled, and became a pile of dead bodies. Obviously, neither Kled nor the dragon lizard knights who were tricked were willing to let go of the dying enemy easily. Margaret did not stop Kled's actions, but just watched coldly. The number of the Legion was not large to begin with. If too many prisoners were kept, it would affect the logistics of the Emerald Legion. Since they had already decided to completely destroy the Frost Kingdom, they might as well kill as many of the enemy's living forces as possible. Knowing that the Narxons would no longer accept surrender, the desperate Frost Kingdom soldiers knew that their two legs could not outrun the horses and dragon lizards, so they no longer threw away their armor and chose to hold their weapons tightly and fight to the death, which showed the momentum of a mourning soldier. Unfortunately, victory and defeat will not be reversed because of a little change in emotions. For the last powerless resistance, clad in the Narksan cavalry chose to kill them all, without any intention of holding back, especially when facing the dragon lizards equipped with metal equipment. The iron weapons of the Freljord people could not break through the defense. After hundreds of deserters were dispersed by the dragon lizard knights, they were ruthlessly annihilated by the emerald infantry following behind. This chase finally turned into a one-sided massacre. The rain stopped, and the sun set. Relying on the natural endurance of the Freljord people, the remnants of the Frost Kingdom retreated to the river in the bloody sunset, causing the birds drinking water by the river to flutter their wings and flee in fear. The once turbulent Black Iron River, after several twists and turns, turned into a gentle and beautiful girl on the flat land of the Dalmor Plain. It was called the Nima River by the barbarians of the Dalmor Plain, which means the mother river that feeds the earth. The sparkling river surface reflected the cold light of the weapons. Yarigad looked nervously at the fleeing soldiers rushing towards the riverbank and turned his head to look at an expressionless face. The owner of the face was named Hill, an iceborn warlock under Gilina. He had an ordinary appearance, but his eyes were very sharp. At least Yarigad didn't dare to look directly into the female warlock's ice blue eyes. It was Hill who asked him to take the soldiers to make arrangements on the east side of the riverbank, and he didn't expect that it would really be used. Shout. Hill's calm voice brought Yarigad back to his senses. He picked up the magic horn that he had been holding for a long time. The man took a deep breath and blew the horn with all his strength. Woo woo woo. The sound of the low horn was not loud, but it was loud enough for everyone within a 3-kilometer range to hear. When Yarigad's mouth had left the horn was still making a low sound under the light of magic. While the sound had not disappeared, Yarigad shouted at the horn. Everyone quickly cross the river. Run to both sides of the army. Anyone who rushes into the formation will be killed without mercy. Everyone quickly cross the river. Run to both sides of the army. Anyone who rushes into the formation will be killed without mercy. Hearing the sound that followed the sound of the horn, the fleeing soldiers in front knew that the retreat was not cut off. It seemed that their bodies had regained strength, and they accelerated desperately, quickly approaching the Nema River. The hope of life seemed to be right in front of them. The fleeing soldiers were still hesitating whether to wade across the river, but they saw that the Nema River had frozen at a speed visible to the naked eye. The river surface was frozen, which made the fleeing soldiers no longer have any worries. They walked directly on the ice, bypassing the long snake formation of hundreds of Yeligads, and ran to the rear. The rumbling sound of horse hooves mixed with the heavy footsteps of dragon lizards came from afar. When Gilina and the other ice warlocks also crossed the river, Hill, with narrowed eyes, said coldly, "Start the ice dragon cannon." Yes. Under the control of the ice warlocks, 5 ice blue dragon-headed cannons made of true ice, rare magic crystals and water dragon cores placed behind the carriage were aimed at the frozen riverbed of the Nema River. Mage Hill, the ice dragon cannon has been charged. Target the Nema River. Fire. Chapter 369 Atlantis Underground Ruins. The order was given, and dozens of continuous ice blue magic light cannons were fired one after another. Each cannon accurately hit the ice surface of the Nema River. The magic light cannons would explode violently after hitting the ice surface. The explosion would absorb the sufficient water element in the river water and condense into a thorny ice wall more than 6 meters high. Under the special effect of Zenbing, the ice wall condensed by magic quickly extended along the river surface toward the upstream and downstream. In just a few seconds, it had formed a magic thorny ice wall that stretched for several miles with the river as the foundation. Amid countless screams and wails, the Narksans were successfully isolated on the other side of the ice wall, but Yeligad's heart did not feel the slightest warmth, but was instead cold. The limbs were torn and pierced by the frost thorns, and the flesh was squeezed into minced meat in the ice wall, and even the hard bones were not spared. The man stared blankly at the Frost Kingdom soldiers who were killed by the ice dragon cannon on the Nema River in his sight. He turned his head to look at Hill, but what he met was the cold eyes of the sorceress. Anything wrong? No, nothing wrong. On the other side, Casper and Wanna, who had always been following not far behind Gilina, looked at the tall ice wall more than 10 meters behind them with lingering fear. The terror between life and death seemed to have not subsided yet. If they were a few steps slower, there would be another pool of bloody mud that could not be seen as human in the thorny ice wall. Humph, Lord Casper, they really don't treat us northerners as human beings. They kill us without leaving any chance of survival. One us sneered at Casper in a low voice, but heard Casper sigh. You are wrong, Vanna. They are not targeting us northerners. In the eyes of those ice warlocks, ordinary people are not considered human beings at all. Naxos is coming with great force. The secret of Shelley Fortress has been completely buried. This time when we return to Fkerd, we should think about how to get out. I don't want to follow that old woman back to Freljord. In the ruins of Atlan in the Goral Mountains, a group of explorers from Hedi are going deeper and deeper under the coercion of someone. The coerced Hedi dare not speak out, and can only forcibly dismantle the magic or mechanical mechanisms at the risk of their lives. After breaking through the entrance guarded by the Garlem Knight, the group passed through the underground residential area and the mine entrance. The field of vision suddenly became wider and the temperature rose by about 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. The architectural style of the residential area has a strong religious connotation. The pointed rib vault supports the entire Gothic style building. Outside the pointed arch are two strange looking stone sculptures of wolves and tigers with wings. The deep red bell-shaped glass has patterns similar to language symbols. The core is inlaid with a rose-colored gem, which Lester took off with one finger and put into his pocket. There are also piles of bones and rotten weapons in the residential area. The houses are seriously damaged inside and outside. After searching around, only 2 houses that have not collapsed completely were found. Except for the rose-colored flawless gem, Lester found nothing. From the residential area to the mine, through the inspection and calculation of Old Quincy, the underground mine has been completely blocked. It would be very risky to dig out the stones blocking the mine. Once the load-bearing beam is destroyed, the entire underground ruins will face the risk of complete collapse. At that time, there is no need to buy a coffin. Just lie down on the spot and return to dust. From the patterns on the murals, the underground ruins of Atlan should be divided into 4 areas: the residential area, the mine, the food planting area and a magic workshop dedicated to processing ore. If we want to find something useful, I think we'd better go to the magic workshop first. No, let's go to the food planting area first. Lester rejected Mosley's proposal directly. Although his strength can easily suppress more than a dozen Hedi people, he can't guarantee that he won't capsize in the gutter. It seems that these people in front of him are obedient and dare not make any small moves, but if he really thinks so, he will definitely suffer a big loss. Okay, I understand. Let Mosley stay close to him. Lester did not relax any vigilance. Coming to the so-called food planting area, at the same level as the residential area, pushing open the heavy stone door covered with lichens, the damp breath and the special smell of rotten eggs of hydrogen sulfide rushed from the darkness of the cave. The gas choked several Hedi people in front, and even Mosley felt his eyes burning and hurt, and instinctively stepped back a few steps. Lester's eyes changed, and in less than a second, the dozen torches that were originally burning were all extinguished by the cold air that Lester mobilized. Without the light of the torches, the eyes were completely shrouded in darkness, as if they were blind. Fortunately, there were patches of luminous lichens and fluorescent algae on the wet stone walls that barely prevented everyone from banging their heads against the wall. This prevented Mosley and a group of Hedi people from drawing their swords and fighting Lester to the death. Ahem, ahem. Sir, why do you want to extinguish the torches? Lester, who was highly nervous, said coldly in response to Mosley's question. If you don't want to die, retreat. With the help of the luminous algae, the explorers in the dark walked back along the original route with difficulty. Only when they confirmed that there was no flammable and explosive gas in the air did Lester breathe a sigh of relief and release a cold light illumination magic, his expression uncertain. Seeing that Lester seemed to have a reason, Mosley thought for a while and asked in a low voice, "Sir, I just smelled a strange odor similar to that from a garbage dump. Could it be that the odor was the reason why the torch was extinguished?" Unexpectedly, the leader of the Hedis was smart enough to understand his intention, so Lester patiently explained. Yes, even in the underground world without sunlight, there are all kinds of life that survive tenaciously. This stinking air is the nutrient that some creatures rely on for survival, and the flame of the torch can easily ignite such gas and cause an explosion. Based on the amount of stink I just sensed, once an explosion occurs, this underground ruin will instantly turn into an erupting volcano, and we will all die here. Lester did not use the more professional explosion limit theory to explain whether the flammable gas in the cave would be ignited by the fire source. He simply explained it, but it made Mosley and the other Hedis pale. Even the powerful Vastaya warriors could not survive the explosion, so they would not have any chance of survival. The fear made everyone look unhappy, and also made Lester's words and actions more trustworthy and persuasive. What should we do? Why don't we give up exploring the food planting area? This was a question without hope, but to Mosley's surprise, Lester nodded. These stench are poisonous enough to be fatal. Without the right equipment, there is really no way to explore further. Chapter 370 Life Forbidden Zone. High concentrations of sulfur and hydrogen gases are enough to cause serious harm to the human body. The poisonous gas can damage the human central nervous system, or cause fatal symptoms such as suffocation and blindness. If you don't know whether the magic isolation is completely effective, it is best to use physical isolation methods. Unless you use a special full coverage filter gas mask and chemical protective clothing to protect your skin, it is impossible to risk your life to explore the life restricted area. Of course, there is another way, which is to evacuate the flammable and explosive gases in the stone door through airflow. No matter which method is used, it is not easy for Lester now. When Lester returned to the entrance alone and closed the stone door that was spewing poisonous gas, everyone returned to the intersection leading to the residential area and the mine. After obtaining Lester's consent, the torch was reignited and the group walked towards the last exploration area. Judging from the feedback brought back by the body, the terrain was still going down. The exploration team kept moving forward on the wide blue-gray stone road without talking. The echo of footsteps reflected from deep underground gave people a strange illusion that someone was walking in a bottomless abyss. The atmosphere began to become depressing. Because of Lester, no one among the Hedis dared to talk nonsense. When the nerves were most tense, the friction sound of the rock brick wall sounded without warning. In less than a second, two crescent-shaped metal guillotines ejected from the gaps on both sides of the wall spun and closed all the space for escape, and chopped towards the Hedis at the front of the team. The click sound was fleeting. The sound of flesh being torn and cut by the sharp blade came with a thick smell of blood. The sharp guillotine that cut off the human body was retracted to both sides of the wall at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye. In the terrified eyes of the people behind, the bodies of the three companions in the front were cut into 3 sections, and even the bones were sawed into pieces by the guillotine. Witnessing with their own eyes that the 3 people who were still alive and kicking just now have now turned into a pile of rotten meat in the ruins, the surviving Hedi people are filled with fear and hatred. Only Lester, who was walking at the back, was indifferent, saying words that would destroy other lives. Mark the location of the mechanism and keep moving forward. If they move forward, they may survive, but if they don't move forward, they will definitely die in the hands of the Vastaya. Mosley gritted his teeth and silently led his men to move forward. The law of the jungle has never changed, but this time he has become the prey and the sacrifice. Sulfuric acid splashing from the jet hole, underground pits covered with steel spikes, nail boards falling from the sky. Various traps are distributed in the passage, taking away one life after another, and the image of the dead is extremely terrifying. When the number of people was reduced to 8, everyone finally left the terrible trap passage. A pointed arch stone door built of grey rocks appeared in front of them. Outside the stone door were 2 huge stone sculptures with hideous shapes. Compared with these 2 tall stone sculptures overlooking everyone, the previous stone sculptures were like harmless little lambs. The wings with bone spikes like a bat are as big as an adult. The densely overlapping fan-shaped scales are thicker than the dragon scales of Scare. The sharp teeth in the half-open mouth can easily penetrate the flesh and tear the bones. The 2 short front claws are no different from human hands. The monster is wearing a heavy stone plate armor, holding a flail, chain hammer, made of human skull, and the thick hind claws are like dragon claws, tightly grasping a human skeleton. The sculpture reveals an evil breath from beginning to end. Lester frowned. He recognized at a glance that the shape and appearance of these two stone sculptures are very similar to the dragon scale gargoyles in the ruins found under the shimmering Silver Mountains. It can even be seen from the delicate degree of carving that these two dragon scale gargoyle statues are much more real than the gargoyle statues in the ruins under the shimmering Silver Mountains. The former stone carver just regarded the gargoyle as a casual entertainment, while the latter stone carver poured a lot of effort to restore every detail of the monster as much as possible. If the owner of the ruins below the shimmering Silver Mountains regarded the dragon scale gargoyle statue as a trophy, then the gargoyle statue in this Atlan ruins is more like a patron saint to be worshipped. Why did the Atlan civilization worship the evil monsters of the Badland? Who destroyed the Atlan civilization and this ruins? Who killed so many people? What is in the depths of this destroyed ruins? Does the magic energy tower exist in this ruins? There are too many mysteries, and one after another question popped up in his mind. Even Lester had to admit that he had been aroused by the truth buried in this ruins. Secrets often mean the truth, and the truth is the most powerful thing in the world. The premise is to know how to use it, rather than to bring disaster to yourself. What is this? Mosley looked at the hideous statue in front of him, and after sensing it to confirm that it was just a stone statue, not some other magical item, he curiously reached out and touched the human skull hanging from the statue's flail. The skull was cold and felt like natural marble. You haven't seen similar statues in the ruins of the North Sea. Lester also pretended to look solemn, and Mosley shook his head. I haven't seen such monster statues. Atlan is a natural anti-god civilization. This can be seen not only in the murals in the North Sea ruins, but also from the architectural style we just saw. The pointed rib arch structure has an upward aggression, which can be said to be a serious offense to the sky, that is, the realm of the gods. Strangely, I saw the meaning of worship in these two monster statues. It stands to reason that the Atlan people would not worship anything or anything except themselves. Not to mention this kind of thing that looks very evil. Continuing the conversation would not have any results. After a short rest, the people with their own ulterior motives passed through the stone arch guarded by the dragon scale gargoyles, and walked into the tomb-like building. What no one knew was that the moment he stepped into the arch, the trembling old Quincy heard a female cry again. This time, the woman's wailing was like being right next to his ear, mournful and sad, as if she had just risen from the grave, carrying hatred for the living, and wishing to take away everyone's soul with coldness. Woo woo. Chapter 371. Blasphemy. Because there were still Hedi Mage Corps in the northeast, the Corps kept rushing towards Northumberland, and Alice's support corps escorted them all the way. After 5 days of forced march, the only 10,000 people left in the Battle of Shelley Fortress finally arrived at Northumberland. In Northumberland, the Vacal Corps, which had fought hard for 3 months, would get a preliminary rest and reorganization, and the military merits gained in the war would be recorded by the recorder, and they would be rewarded by the Narxan Supreme Command. The corps of more than 30,000 people was eventually reduced to more than 10,000 people. The tragic war made the remaining Narxan soldiers still have murderous intent in their eyes, even after leaving the battlefield. Damn it, it's already been 3 months in the blink of an eye. I didn't expect that I could really hold on. Those long-haired barbarians and the cowards from the North Sea still couldn't take my life. Since they couldn't take my life, I'm going to take your lives, haha. Vacal Rezus, who had lost a lot of weight and relaxed his body and got off the carriage with a sneer, had a thick beard that completely covered the chin and upper lip of the middle-aged man. In addition, he exuded all kinds of sour and smelly smells. The whole person looked uncomfortable, as if he had just been fished out of a swill bucket. Only the saber on his waist was still as bright as new. Even if the general of Narxus was in a mess, no one among the Narxans present would really show any disrespect to Vacal. No one who was besieged in a lonely mountain fortress by twice as many enemies and fought a 3-month hungry battle would not be stronger than the man in front of him. Roy Seraphim also got off the carriage. His expression was a little complicated. It seems that there is no panic or frustration on Vacal's face. Even when the battle situation is the worst, the man with a mind as strong as steel will not reveal any weakness. It seems that the man really has no weaknesses. If it were not for Vakul and the Narkson soldiers who would rather die than surrender, then Owen, the political officer of the Frost Kingdom, would not have chosen to send Carlos to surrender to Naxos. In this case, I'm afraid that everyone would have died in the ruined Shelly Fortress, instead of joining forces with the support legion of the Emerald Territory to force out the Hedi people who did not work hard, and let the Shelly Fortress, which had evacuated all the legion members, become an empty city again. Lord Dallas, I want to take Philrus's body away myself. After this time, I owe you 2 favors in the Emerald Territory. Vakul took a few nibbles on the cigar, but still did not light the strong cigarette. His weak body no longer allowed him to smoke. Although he was strong, he knew where his body's bottom line was. Of course not. It is our honor to help a hero like General Vakul. Mage Uzel, please hand over the body of General Phirrus to General Vakul. Yes, General Alice. When Alice instructed the accompanying Mage Uzel, Vakul admired Alice's heroic profile with a calm look. Although Vakul's face could not show it, he was indescribably envious in his heart. Narkson people all knew how romantic Lester, the Lord of Emerald Territory, was. The Lord's wives, who were either beautiful, cute or pure, were the topics that the Narkson nobles talked about every day. Vakul did not envy the Lord of Emerald Territory for getting the angel sisters who were high above and blessed by the gods and held the artifacts, but he envied the Lord of Emerald Territory for getting 2 loyal female generals who were good at fighting. Expanding territory was much more attractive to him than women. Enjoying beautiful women on the basis of expanding territory was what he dreamed of. General Vakul, I think you must have many women who are more beautiful than me under your command, right? It's better to save your energy on beautiful women than on me. Vakul came back to his senses and knew that Alice was warning him for being rude, so he smiled apologetically and said frankly, General Alice is right, but there are many beautiful women, but iron-blooded beauties like you and General Margaret are rare. I'm just a little envious of Lord Lester for having such a good fortune. Please forgive me if I'm rude. If possible, after this war, I will personally go to the Emerald Territory to visit Lord Lester. At that time, I hope General Alice can introduce me to Lord Lester, so that I can see the peerless style of Lord Emerald Territory, and let Lord Lester guide me on how to build a strong territory. These sincere words made Alice stunned. She looked at herself again, and made sure that the Narkson general who held the power in front of her did not have any improper thoughts about her. Then she resumed her friendly tone and attitude. But, Lester, General Alice, is there any difficulty for me to visit Lord Lester? Vakul was somewhat confused by the inexplicable attitude of the female general. Of course not. The woman smiled politely, but no one except herself could see the bitterness and uneasiness in the woman's heart. I think Lord Lester will have a long talk with you all night. Regarding how to establish a territory, I think no one in the whole of Naxos can surpass Lord Lester's experience. Goral Mountains, deep in the underground ruins of Adlan. Why would a civilization with a spirit of resisting gods worship such evil things? It was like walking into a cathedral that worshipped evil gods. All I could see were some uncomfortable dark sculptures, decorations, and murals, including but not limited to large music boxes made of human skeletons, skeleton human skin drums made of human skin skeletons, female human sculptures with heads, replaced with bull heads after amputation and limbs sewn into livestock limbs, and some bloody murals and reliefs showing torture and punishment. There were hundreds of pieces in total. Everywhere is a worship of blood, violence, darkness and evil. There is nothing in the entire building that meets normal human aesthetics. Even the dark satanic sacrifices that Lester had seen in his previous life were far inferior. The visually shocking scene made several Hedi people vomit directly. Satanism is at most about cutting wrists and having a party, and at most cutting off goat heads to make leather sleeves and putting them on your head to experience the feeling of being a devil. Compared with the trampling of humanity and morality and the blasphemy of justice and virtue here, Satanism is simply a devil baby who just picked up a bottle. This is simply heresy. It's a temple of the devil. This was definitely not built by the Adlans. Mosley's face was very ugly. Even if they hate gods, the Adlans will not worship the devil. What they are most proud of is always themselves. The Adlans definitely did not build this place. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372, Crimson Dance of Hell. Ugh. It seems these things are not finished yet. Ugh. Old Quincy, who was retching continuously, took 2 steps back, away from the square dining table decorated with human body parts. The tablecloth on the dining table was full of dark brown spots, as if it was deliberately dyed red with blood. Lester turned his head and saw that what the Heedy people said was right. The bone tabler and lampstand on the dining table did not seem to be carefully polished. Some foot bones were even just placed beside the bowl for grinding skulls as knives and forks to make up the numbers. Looking at other objects and decorations, each blasphemous object had some flaws that were difficult to ignore, and even the placement of the items revealed a sense of urgency to hurry up. Unlike the Heedy people who vomited continuously, Lester just frowned in such an environment. With a solemn face, Lester walked around from beginning to end and did not find anything valuable. However, a grey skeleton holding a bone flute on the round platform in front of him made Lester a little concerned. From the posture of the skeleton, it seemed that the skeleton was playing the bone flute when he was alive. Lester called Mosley and asked, "Does your energy crystal react?" From the flash frequency of the energy crystal, "I'm afraid something related to the crystal is here." While the two were talking, the old Quincy, who was sitting on the ground and extremely weak, only felt that the woman's resentful crying beside him was getting louder and louder, almost sticking to his ears, as if there was nowhere to hide. In a trance, he found that the messy sound coming from his side and the woman's crying disappeared instantly. His blank eyes swept across the surrounding environment, and the old Quincy's eyes shrank. He came to the unfinished blasphemy. At some point, hundreds of figures with unclear faces appeared around him. Everyone was in a hurry, holding knives or some sharp spikes in their hands, and placed some very normal decorations everywhere. This situation lasted until a person holding a crimson gem walked in. In an instant, everyone stopped what they were doing and turned their bodies towards the person holding the gem like stiff puppets, watching the person walk up to the round platform. In order to see the person's face clearly, old Quincy found that his actions were in vain. The face that seemed to be crying and laughing appeared in front of him in the most terrifying form, like a nightmare. All he saw was a ghost face, and that ghost face was still staring at him, becoming more and more terrifying. Old Quincy, whose heart almost stopped, finally gave up the idea of looking directly into the eyes and briefly moved his sight to the chest of the ghost face. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he just felt that the chest of the ghost face was a little swollen, like a woman's chest. Everything in front of him was indescribably weird. Old Quincy, who couldn't move, could only control his perspective and witness the horror that happened in the past from the perspective of a bystander. Then, the woman moved. Under the horrified gaze of old Quincy, the fist-sized gem was swallowed by the woman, who tore open her mouth and got stuck in her throat. Blood flowed from her lips and broken throat. The woman seemed to be talking. After a moment, the woman reached into her throat and took out a bone flute about 13 centimeters long. The bulging throat also calmed down. Old Quincy didn't know if the bone flute was a bone in the woman's body. He just had a hunch that the most terrifying thing was about to happen. The strange flute sound appeared in his ears. Sure enough, as the woman on the high platform began to play the bone flute, the still pictures below the stage began to flow, and terrifying scenes appeared in various places. Looking at it with nausea and fear, old Quincy only felt cold all over, and his heartbeat quickened. Most of the dark style decorations and utensils were made up of hundreds of living people present. Some cut themselves, some helped others, just like a sacrifice. Everyone was trying to be the most eye-catching and perfect one in this feast. Unfortunately, there were only a few who could perfectly sew themselves into decorations and integrate into the dark existence. Most of them stopped abruptly when they were about to be completed and were forced to be made into their own works of art by another person. The dark creation activities using human bodies and flesh and blood as materials lasted for 3 days and 3 nights in the sound of the flute, and old Quincy was numb. In the second half of the time, in old Quincy's empty vision, The living people active in the venue had become dozens of white skeletons that were not used as materials and had their flesh and blood shaved off. They danced gracefully in the sound of the flute, and the footsteps of the skeleton slowly approached the player on the high platform. The clothes were cut open by the sharp blade, and old Quincy saw the white soft flesh through his bleeding eyes, confirming that the player was a plump and beautiful woman. It had nothing to do with lust. Old Quincy just felt that such a body was not perfect and needed some more perfect processing. Any flesh and blood was redundant. The sound of the flute did not stop, but the flesh and blood were slowly peeled off by the sharp weapon. The player let out a woman's painful wail. Old Quincy's almost stagnant thinking ability made him not understand why the woman could still make painful sounds while playing. No, it should be, why can't she make a more painful cry? The knife piercing the bone marrow is not strong enough. How can a cry that is not full of despair be worthy of this beautiful dark feast? Finally, the player turned into a skeleton exactly like the others in the duet of flute and wailing. It seemed that some mysterious reaction had occurred. With the player's flesh and blood as the core and dozens of skeletons as symbolic sacrifices, a magic circle with a dark red main color and an unknown language engraved on it appeared on the circular platform where the player stood. The bones were arranged in different postures, forming various evil hell characters. After being connected by the flowing flesh and blood that seemed to have life, a dazzling light burst out. Vicious voices came out from the light, and old Quincy heard wild laughter. Arsonomiyasofina. Karlaseth. The old Quincy, bleeding from all 7 orifices, recited the hellish language that he could understand, but the voice belonged to a woman. He wanted to cry when he opened his eyes, but she knew that she still had things to do. Latiovianus. Old Quincy, what are you crazy about? Finally suppressing the nausea, Cosmo looked at the old Quincy who was speaking an unknown language with a puzzled look. Just hearing this language made his body feel seriously uncomfortable and dizzy. The old Hede man ignored Cosmo's meaning and walked straight to the skeleton on the platform. Old Quincy? What's wrong with you? Lester was attracted by Cosmo's voice and saw the old Quincy who was about to climb up the platform, but he had no intention of stopping him. The exploration in the ruins has come to an end. The only place that may be valuable besides the food planting area is here. Naturally, he will not stop the upcoming changes. The show is about to begin. As expected, the key point lies in the skeleton and the skeleton's bone flute. It was the right decision not to let Zaya and Evelyn come here. The evil power here is definitely related to the Badland. Chapter 373 Grayskull and the Devil. Old Quincy. Mosley also saw the old miner who was about to touch the skeleton and instinctively wanted to stop him, but hesitated after catching a glimpse of Lester. Given the vigilance of the Vastaya, under normal circumstances, there was absolutely no possibility for him and his men to kill the Vastaya. Once the Vastaya got what he wanted, he and his men would definitely die here. The promises given by the other party were not worth mentioning at all. Under absolute power, life and death were in the hands of others. Until now, the other party had not said his name, and it was too stupid to believe in such a person. He hated the feeling of being a fish on the chopping board. Unless there was an unexpected situation, it would be impossible to defeat such an enemy. At present, although allowing the abnormal old Quincy to contact unknown forces and things may lead to unpredictable and terrible consequences, it is much better than walking into a dead end step by step. One is an absolute dead end, and the other is an unknown road that may lead to death or life. If the lucky old Quincy can obtain powerful power, then maybe he can use him to kill the Vastaya magic master and successfully obtain the secret Sidon and the ruins. At worst, he can escape. With this mentality, both Lester and Mosley were indifferent to the old Quincy who climbed up the platform. Cosmo, on the other hand, had already seen that the old Quincy seemed to be possessed by something evil, so he climbed up the platform to stop the old Quincy from approaching the skeleton. Old Quincy is not right. He seems to be possessed by something. Cosmo hugged old Quincy from behind, but saw that old Quincy suddenly turned his head at a 180-degree rotation angle and showed Cosmo a creepy and strange smile. The bones and flesh of the old miner's neck were like twisted twists, and the wrinkles on his face were brighter than chrysanthemums, and there was a faint feminine temperament. A chill rushed to the top of his head. The frightened Cosmo instinctively loosened his arms and fell backwards to the ground. Vyasala, the old Quincy, who blasphemed life, turned his head back at a terrifying speed that violated the human body structure, took 2 steps forward, and hugged the grey skeleton. "You are savvy." 4 disgusting, evil monosyllables like rotten flesh and maggots were uttered clearly. The flesh and blood of old Quincy, who was holding the grey skeleton, began to melt, just like liquid flowing from the contact point to the grey skeleton. As the flesh and blood gradually increased, a thin layer of flesh and blood fibers grew on the bones of the grey skeleton. Old Quincy's body melted faster and soon became a white skeleton. In just a dozen seconds, the grey skeleton turned into a naked purple-skinned woman. The woman's body was extremely graceful, which could be called the most coveted gift for males. Unfortunately, the woman's face was like rotten meat with maggots, full of large and small holes, which completely dispelled the idea of spending the night happily. Just looking at that face, even the overpass meal could be vomited. The naked monster with a rotten face patted the white skeleton that was holding him. The white skeleton obediently let go of his hand and stepped back half a step. Then the purple-skinned monster took the initiative to imprint his rotten face on the skull that old Quincy had turned into, and licked the teeth of the white skeleton's skull with his rotten tongue that was only half grown, as if kissing. During the passionate tongue kiss, the color of the white skeleton gradually turned gray. Witnessing this grotesque scene that blasphemed life and gods, even the most dull-witted ED people understood that old Quincy had turned into an evil monster, and they took the initiative to approach Lester, who felt the most secure. Lester also watched the kiss on the high platform like a musical without blinking, but he frowned. He suspected that old Quincy had died long ago, and that the monster had been directing and acting all along. Ugh. My god, what kind of monster is that? Is old Quincy still old Quincy? Ugh. Nonsense. Will you still be ugh if you turn into a grey skeleton? Mosley, find someone to attack the grey skeleton and the purple-skinned monster. Hearing Lester say this, Mosley's face turned pale, and the others looked at their superiors pleadingly. Either find someone to go, or you go. Lester's voice was indifferent and ruthless. Taking a deep breath, Mosley looked at Cosmo, who was slumped on the ground and breathing heavily. Cosmo, you care about old Quincy the most. Go see him. Cosmo, who was scared to death and had just escaped from the high platform, shook his head in despair and refused. Lord Mosley, I never cared about old Quincy. You must be mistaken. My legs are so weak that I can't even stand up. What should I do? Mosley drew his sword and directly put it on the neck of Cosmo, who was sitting on the ground. This action did not cause any disgust, but instead made other Hedi people who were not named feel relieved. Cosmo, you should understand that we have no choice, go or not. Then why don't you go? You actually ask me why I didn't go? Mosley's face suddenly became ferocious as he spoke. Because I need to live, because I'm more valuable than you, and because I'm your superior. Just as he was about to pierce Cosmo's chest with a sword, Lester grabbed Mosley's arm like an iron clamp, making Mosley's struggle seem a little futile. Use your magic to attack the monsters, and don't get too close to them. After calming down a little, Mosley nodded and was let go by Lester. Cosmo, who was full of hatred towards Mosley, also nodded, stood up from the ground, and moved away from Mosley. The remaining 7 Hedi people began to cast non-attribute energy magic on the monster on the high platform. Unconsciously, it affected the character of the Hedi people in dealing with the world. Selfishness, tyranny, cruelty, and emotionality are all personality attributes added in this strange space. This ability is similar to the domain aura. It is a bit troublesome to use it as a means of attack by polluting the soul. The energy magic hit the grey skeleton and the purple-skinned monster, but it did not cause any effective damage except for making the 2 people retreat half a step. Instead, the purple-skinned monster let go of the grey skeleton and turned its rotten face to everyone. Being stared at by the rotten face of the purple-skinned monster, Mosley's face was very ugly. His attack methods had no effect. Old Quincy also looked like he had been transformed into a monster. This time, fate was obviously not on his side. If he wanted to survive, he had to unite with the dangerous Vastea. Crack, crack, crack. The grey skeleton that Quincy had transformed into suddenly jumped down from the high platform and staggered towards the crowd. Attack that skeleton. The swarming magic attacks made the grey skeleton stagnate. It seemed that it could not continue to withstand more magic attacks. After resisting a burst of light arrows, the grey skeleton was scattered into a pile of bones. Dead. Did we kill the skeleton that old Quincy turned into? Chapter 374 Bone Flute Soloist. Before he finished speaking, the scattered skeletons of the grey skull began to roll and gather on their own and reassembled into a complete form. At the same time, the purple-skinned monster on the high platform also grew a mouth and put the bone flute in his hand to his lips. Yasilva. The moment the flute sounded, a feeling that made everyone's soul tremble swept over, and the originally calm blasphemous place instantly became boiling. The dozen skull lamps and human skin lamps that had been extinguished instantly ignited ominous dark red flames, and the stone door at the entrance behind them quickly closed. Two stone sculptures of tortured people with livestock heads approached the stone door. The moment they touched the stone door, their bodies began to burn and became stone door reliefs burning with flames. The left door was a cow's head and the right door was a sheep's head. The dark red hell characters flashed on the door. Two arms made of chains and flames stretched out from the door, holding a thorny iron whip and a barbed butcher knife respectively, and the beast heads hummed blasphemous words in their mouths. The drum made of skull and human skin was played by the skull that rose from the ground. The skeleton music box grew twisted tibia and broken feet and danced a strange butterfly dance. The beheaded woman in the painting and various flesh and blood decorations seemed to have gained life, blaspheming life in a unique way that made people's scalps numb, twisting the texture and skeleton. The whole world seemed to be trapped in blood and flames. The grey skeleton's steps were no longer staggering. It turned into a 100-meter sprinter and pounced on everyone. Lester didn't need to say anything this time. The Hedi people split into two waves and began to attack the grey skeleton and the purple-skinned monster spontaneously. There was nothing wrong with the decision. The only problem was that the attack was too soft and powerless. Whether it was the grey skeleton or the purple-skinned monster, energy magic had no effect. In Lester's words, the enemy's magic resistance was full. The grey skeleton, enduring the magic attack, finally pounced on a Hedi who didn't have time to dodge. As if infected with the plague, the Hedi's flesh and blood began to fall off like a broken wall, and in just a few seconds, it turned into a white skeleton. At the same time, Lester found that the flesh and blood of the purple-skinned monster playing the bone flute on the high platform began to grow again, and the flesh and blood on its face became fuller, which made Lester more certain of his guess. The grey skeleton began to recover its body, and the white skeleton tried to get up, but was smashed to pieces by a sword again. Someone waved a long knife and tried to avoid the strange blasphemous things along the way. He wanted to rush to the platform to interrupt the devil's flute, but was grabbed by the skeleton arm that suddenly stretched out from the ground. When he couldn't move, the skull spider dancing next to him forcibly pulled out his head. The rolling head was stripped of flesh and blood by the skeleton bench and made into a skull carving on the armrest of the chair. The skull spider successfully jumped on the bleeding neck and replaced the original head. The head turned and came to the rest of the living. Witnessing the desperate scenes, including Mosley, the remaining Hedi people shed creepy tears of blood. Lester frowned and raised a red rune barrier around his body, isolating the pollution from the spirit and soul with red runes. The red rune that can harvest the souls of the dead can naturally defend against soul attacks, provided that Lester actively activates it. But he didn't notice that the moment he opened the rune shield, the rotten-faced monster on the platform turned his head and looked at him. Sir, you must have a way to deal with these monsters, right? Save me, save me, save me, save me, save me, Jojo Josiah. The completely desperate Mosley seemed to be unaware of the condition of his body and looked at Lester with a distorted face. The other Hedi people whose bodies began to mutate also placed their hopes of survival on Lester, but what came to them was Lester's unsheathed moon rose. Unfortunately, your life has come to an end. Let me give you a quick death. With one knife, the remaining 5 people were directly cut in half. Lester put away the energy crystal fragments in Mosley's pocket. Naturally, he would not be stupid enough to let the enemy use fresh flesh and blood to strengthen himself. The flesh and blood of the 5 people were directly made into 5 flesh and blood puppets emitting death by Lester using the Akasha death magic and the dark seal. Under Lester's control, the 5 flesh puppets picked up their swords and knives and fought with the tenacious grey skeleton, white skeleton and skull spider. Because the essence of life had already left the scope of human beings, the special power of the grey skeleton to corrode the human body and soul had lost its effect, and the skull spider could not replace the puppet's head. For a while, it was suppressed by many flesh puppets holding weapons, and shattered again and again. At the moment of killing Mosley and others, Lester could clearly sense that there was attraction from the high platform that was pulling the souls of several people closer. It was obviously the purple-skinned monster that was causing trouble. Without using the dark seal, or allowing the red rune to absorb the soul, the man took out the soul pyroxene, and pulled the soul that was about to leave back. As the dim soul pyroxene emitted a colorful halo, a sneer appeared at the corner of Lester's mouth. Want to steal my soul? Then let's see who is the real devil. The uninterrupted flute sound finally stopped, and the purple-skinned devil on the high platform began to move his lips, and whispered in a somewhat unfamiliar Narxan language. Human, human. The purple-skinned devil responded with a sharp blood-red blade light, which released all the bloody evil energy stored in the Moonrose scabbard, dark red dragon crystal. Everything along the way was split in two by the blade light. The thick evil blood flames that could not be dissolved, attached to each slashed blasphemous object, making a sizzling sound. It was only blocked by a deep red ripple when it approached the platform. Except for the grey skeleton, who was still resisting stubbornly, the bodies of the white skeleton and the skull spider were completely annihilated. Even though they could recover under the evil laws and power, they could only return to this strange space because they had lost their sustenance and waited for the domain master to further use and drive them. As they moved forward, Lester crushed the grey skull head that was rolling on the ground due to the burning blood flames. Under the erosion of the red runes, the grey skull could no longer be resurrected, which made the bone flute soloist on the platform more certain of certain things. After the flesh and blood squirmed, the original evil just became 2 sizes smaller. Using the extra flesh and blood on the chest, the bone flute soloist finally grew a charming and beautiful face, and even had 2 black horns on his head. Wait, first, don't do it. We are not enemies. I'm an Atlantean. Lester paused as he moved the bone flute away from his sexy purple lips. The oppression brought by the strange space to his body instantly became much smaller, and Lester put down the Moonrose that was strengthened by the power of runes. If you don't do it, do you want to move your mouth? Lester teased, but he didn't expect the purple-skinned female devil to blush, and put her slender index finger into her lips and sucked it, and responded with a charming smile. Move your mouth. Okay, you. Dare you? The man's face rose. Lester really didn't dare to face the monster with sharp teeth that looked neither human nor ghost. Chapter 375 The Last Atlantean. Since the other party claimed to be an Atlantean and was willing to talk, Lester was willing to put down his weapon and listen. For him, this kind of closed domain was not the first time he had seen it. When he was in Ionia, he was brought into the alien space opened up by Nocturne, which was mixed with the spiritual realm and the soul realm, and fought with Nocturne using Evelyn. Without knowing how to leave the domain space, he could leave the domain by killing the creator of the domain, and he had enough strength and confidence to deal with the enemy in front of him. As Yang Ling said, his strength has surpassed most of the strong men in Runeland and entered the extraordinary realm. It is easy to rely on one's own strength to massacre the city and the race in the material realm. This is the only 2 reasons why he was warned and monitored by the Mother of Masks. The other main reason is that the Mother of Masks has known that his soul does not belong to Runeland. 2 rune powers, red and green, Ionia spell power, weapon breaking spell, dragon hiding body spell, rune magic, human form rune alienation, and natural magic, Vastea form, dark seal and unknown strengthening spells on human skin scrolls, Icathy and death-related black magic, controlling skeletons and creating flesh puppets. If you count Moonroses and soul pyroxene, I'm afraid even demigods can try to fight against it. In the past 22 years, in addition to operating and building territories, he has been strengthening himself as much as possible and has never slacked off. Although he has special opportunities and luck, it is also the result he deserves. If he can't do this while knowing most of the background of the League of Legends, then this trip to another world is undoubtedly a failure, at least for a top killer in the modern world. Strength is a necessary and sufficient condition for calmness. Of course, he will not take unnecessary risks, such as sticking a ham sausage into a grinder that looks gorgeous on the outside but is sharp on the inside. He doesn't want to try whether the female monster's mouth is a meat grinder. If you can speak more fluently, I can consider it. Wait a minute. Putting the bone flute to her lips, the female devil closed her eyes. The strange bone flute was blown by the purple-skinned female devil again, and a gust of cold wind blew. This time, Lester entered a semi-meditative state and witnessed the dark red airflow carrying two translucent souls being sucked into the female devil's mouth. From the general appearance, it was the two Heedy people killed by the grey skeleton Old Quincy and the skull spider. The human souls killed by the other party will be bound by this domain space. Through the control of the bone flute, the soul can be directly devoured to obtain a part of the things of the devoured soul. With such ability, does the other party really exist as a devil? There is still hell in this world? What is this? Another world invading another world? Is this universe a multiverse? While guessing the truth of Runeland, Lester looked at the devil creature suspected to be from hell in the legend again. In addition to the devil horns, it seems that there is also a peach hardtail missing. When the female devil opened her eyes again, she could already speak fluently in Narkson. The face of the female devil was filled with deep sorrow. The language you are using now also belongs to Valoran. I didn't expect that more than 1,000 years have passed without us noticing. Thanks to those damn gods, we Atlanteans have disappeared in human history, sleeping underground, and forgotten forever by people. Even I have become this half-human half-ghost appearance. With sadness, the purple-skinned female devil jumped down from the high platform. The dark purple large popping candy in the dark and narrow cracks in the ground made Lester a little dizzy. It seemed that she noticed the man's gaze. The female devil looked down and finally found the reason for her refreshing. She was stunned for a moment, and two pink halos appeared on her purple face. Before, she treated the other party as prey, and the essence of life was greatly different. Just like humans look at monkeys and cats and dogs, they naturally don't care about being exposed, and they only want to kill and devour. Now that they are treated as equal conversation partners, this image is not very suitable. Although she is no longer a human being, she can't forget the memory of being a human being, and can't give up the habits of being a human being. After turning her back, the female devil waved her hand, and the broken bones on the ground were reassembled into a set of cool skeleton armor under the strange power. It was called armor, but in fact it only covered a few important parts, which was similar to a bikini, especially the balance made of two hand bones. For Lester, it was better not to cover it. Half covering is always more tempting than being open. Fortunately, he is also a veteran. The scenery in the ancestral village of Mickelan is not much better than this. There are many people who like to live in a pure natural posture. After seeing too much, they become numb. By the way, Lester understands why the skeleton hand bones that cover the cracks in the ground need a very long middle finger. I'm sorry for being rude just now. My name is Lily Vicky Doris Valentina V Victoria. 135 characters omitted here. Brittany Linda Silviarella. Thank you for listening to my self-introduction patiently. As the last Atlantean, who still has memories of the past, I must bear all the surnames of the Atlanteans. Lester saw the deep hatred on the faces of the Atlantean survivors. Thinking back to the gods the woman just mentioned, I'm afraid that the demise of the Atlanteans is inseparable from the gods. Although I want to respect you, your name is too long. Can it be shorter? This will make it easier for us to communicate. Seeing that the Atlantean casually inserted the strange bone flute into the middle of the skeleton armor on his chest, and was tightly clamped by the soft flesh, Lester also put the moon rose back into the scabbard. Feeling the man's kindness, Lila's expression became a little softer. After sleeping for 1,000 years, I found a future strong man who has the power to kill gods, and the strong man's appearance is also very handsome and cute. Is there anything more worthy of joy than this? Then you can call me Lily. I wonder what you, a handsome and noble person, should call me. Lily, you don't have to use honorifics. According to age, you are the senior. I can feel your kindness. Let's forget the differences in race and age and communicate in a more relaxed way. You can call me Lester. I want to know why you say we are not enemies? After all, according to your current form and your behavior just now, you don't seem to be a friendly race. It's better to say that, Lily. You should have left the category of human beings now, right? How can a normal person grow horns and control so many skeletons casually? Lily nodded without denying it and casually shaped 2 skeleton benches. Affected by the power of the domain, the 2 skulls on the armrests jumped happily, and even the black eye sockets turned into the shape of friendly cashews. Sitting down on the skeleton bench, 2 skulls rolled around on Lily's shoulders to give her a massage. Lily smiled. I thought you were going to say something about my ugly purple skin, but you were paying attention to my devil horns. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.